So good. We are ready to start the meeting. It is at 6:01 p.m. Before we start, I just want to let you know that we have two council members who are, as you can see, from remote tonight, Vice Mayor Herod and Councilmember Kelly. So welcome and thank you for taking your time out of your busy travel schedules to do this. Just a reminder, if I'll be watching for you to make sure you get to participate as much as you want to, but if raise your hand if I'm missing you. So I just want to make sure we catch everything. Okay. So I will call this meeting to order. If we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Higley.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly.
Here.
Vice Mayor Herod.
Here.
Mayor Mitchell.
Here. And if you join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So move to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? Oh, no. Do we need to do a roll call with the Zoom council? Yeah. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yes.
Councilmember Higley.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Herod.
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell.
Yes, thank you. And so moving on to report on closed session, we did have a closed session and a no reportable action on that. So now we move on to announcements and presentations. So we have a proclamation that I'm very pleased to be able to present tonight and read. So we'll start with that. So proclamation of the City Council of the City of Healdsburg declaring February 2025 Spay-Neuter Awareness Month and February 25th as World Spay Day in the City of Healdsburg. Whereas the concept of celebrating a dedicated month to spread awareness about spaying and neutering was first discussed in the early 2000s by a number of veterinary associations. Am I getting a feedback here? Is it okay? Veterinary associations around the world who wanted to raise awareness about pet overpopulation. And whereas every year millions of healthy, adoptable cats and dogs are euthanized due to lack of space and shelters or rehoming opportunities, and spaying or neutering pets promotes the health of companion animals and has been shown to significantly reduce pet overpopulation and helps to eliminate or decrease several pet health problems that can be difficult or expensive to treat. And domestic animals have provided companionship to people throughout history. And today, companion animals offer affection and improved sense of well-being to millions. And all animals deserve loving homes and proper care throughout their lifetimes. And we encourage all to learn about options to spay and neuter your pets this month and encourage you to support our local animal shelters, rescue groups, and spay-neuter organizations that are leading the way in promoting and protecting animal welfare. So now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the City Council of the City of Healdsburg hereby recognizes February 2025 as Spay-Neuter Awareness Month and February 25th, 2025 as World Spay Day in the City of Healdsburg. And here to accept the proclamation is Charlotte Pierce, who's a co-founder of Dogwood Animal Rescue, and Pam Ingalls, who is an amazing volunteer at that organization. So would you like to come up and say something? Show everybody your dog? Is it me? Hit the button, the green button, or the button that makes the light green.
How's that?
That's better.
Wonderful. All right. So I'm Charlotte Pierce. I'm one of the co-founders of Dogwood Animal Rescue. And this is Pam Ingalls, my co-volunteer. And this is Cuppy. And Cuppy's available for adoption. He's a senior dog that was found as a stray, and he is in the Dogwood program. We're a volunteer organization. We just celebrated our 9th anniversary. We have about 200 volunteers. We do not have an animal shelter. We have about 100 animals in our program at any given time, and they're all in our volunteer homes. So we like it that way. There's low overhead and no payroll. One of the things that happens every day, every single day at Dogwood, is we have to turn down about 100 surrender requests. These are people that can no longer keep their animals. Their animals have had puppies or kittens, And the overpopulation crisis is worse than I've ever seen. When we started Dogwood, we knew the one thing that we had to focus on, along with saving about 1,000 animals a year, is we had to focus on reducing pet overpopulation. We're never going to adopt our way out of this. We have to spay and neuter. So we have opened the door for pet owners to get affordable spay and neuter throughout California. So our little volunteer group here in Sonoma County, we have 18 programs that we manage. And last year we provided 11,185 surgeries to pet owners and feral cats in the state of California. So I'm very proud of that. Overall, we have spayed and neutered over 32,000 animals from our little volunteer-powered group. And I'm so proud of that. It's the only way we're going to curb the tide. So this is a really important proclamation. So thank you for inviting us here. And do you have anything to say, Pam?
You covered it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you for your work. If you guys want to come up and we'll take a picture and hand you.
Sure.
Maybe we can on the Okay, so we'll move on to the presentation from Healdsburg High School Art Club. Linus Lancaster. Where is he? There he is.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you for giving us an opportunity to present here. So among the things called for by the Arts and Culture Master Plan is a greater degree of collaboration between the city of Healdsburg and local schools in order to increase opportunities for creative education, public art activities, and engagement in civic processes for young people in our community. As the newly formed Arts and Culture Commission begins to implement the plan, my students at HHS and Marcy Becerra Academy would like to present a variety of projects that are already in process. We hope that these projects will exemplify the kind of integrated transdisciplinary work that blends creative scholarship with civic planning and infrastructure. Coincidentally, HUSD has just drafted a district arts plan which reinforces the call for increased collaboration between HUSD, the city of Healdsburg, and other local creative nonprofit organizations. The formation of the Arts and Culture Commission and the drafting and adoption of the Strategic Arts Plan for HUSD is a fortunate coincidence that presents us with some really extraordinary opportunities. So mostly what I'd like to talk about this evening is infrastructure and its relationship to creative processes. When we talk about art, we generally are talking about storytelling and artifice, which is design, thinking, process, and execution. Infrastructure isn't conventionally associated with storytelling, but it can be. Certainly, there's a lot of language involved. For example, we have here the Caltrans Bible that was referred by Larry Zimmer, and this guides us in some of our public activities. There's a lot of language involved here, not necessarily a great deal of storytelling, but it's a matter of interpretation. Infrastructure is inherently transdisciplinary in that replacing a fire hydrant involves design decisions, problem solving, skilled practice, and could engage community if we let it. We have other projects that we're working on that are more specific to education, but which still pertain to infrastructural processes to the extent that they are public. The implementation of the ACMP calls on us to stretch our imaginations a bit about what public art can be and how it might relate to other civic processes. So we've got a slide up here that shows the front page of the Arts and Culture Master Plan and the front page of the HUSD Strategic Arts Plan. And again, it's just a really, really fortunate coincidence that these are coming about and reaching a point of implementation at the same time. And they do reinforce each other in terms of calling for a greater degree of collaboration and engagement between our different organizations, between HUSD, the city, and other creative nonprofits in town. So brought some friends with me who I'd like to introduce if you will come on up. So this is Savannah Brandt. This is Finn Aslant and Tor Top, who is teacher and director for the Marcy Becerra Academy, Yuretsi Lopez, Andrea Zamudio, and Citlali Salcido, and Julieta Plaza back there, who are all students that are engaged in the processes, the projects that I'm going to be presenting tonight. They're stepping up to leadership positions within both environmental projects and educational projects involving student teaching at other campuses and a wide variety of other things. Do I have a clicker for slides, or do I have to? Next slide, please. So we don't conventionally think of environmental restoration and biodiversity projects as infrastructural, because we tend to think of those as being man-made items and so forth. But surely the environment is the thing that all else rests upon. And so we are engaged in a native planting campaign at the Healdsburg High School that was initiated by an Indigenous teacher and guest artist that was invited in by Tor, and she got us going on a native plant garden. It has spread across the Healdsburg High campus. Hopefully it will spread to other campuses as well, and then eventually out into the community. And the importance of natives environmentally is a long story, but it's something that has a great deal of importance, and we've been working on this for a couple of years now. Next slide, please. Here's an example of an extension of that project, printed QR codes that are framed by ceramics that my students made that are being put out in front of plants that bear some description. This nondescript looking plant here is actually coffeeberry, very important native plant. You scan that QR code, it takes you to the CalScape or CalFlora website that give you more information that you want to know about this plant and its importance. We've also done some permanent installations of storm drain warnings. This is an ongoing project that we're pledged to continue with and to maintain. Some of them have gotten broken and need replacing, but for the most part, they're out there surviving and doing pretty well. Next slide, please. All right. We put in a request to modify a stop sign, and the location that we originally wanted was not appropriate, it turned out, but we got this one on the Foss Creek bike path and came up with this design and got it taken care of. So I'm going to reintroduce you to Finn real quick and ask you to just say a quick word about your process and how you did this.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to say I really enjoy seeing art in the community. We have some art right outside. I think it's a bench. I'm not 100% sure, but I like seeing it integrated with the infrastructure and just a plain old stop sign. And it was awesome to see some skills that I learned at an internship put into art. Thank you very much. I was interning at Black Iron.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So yeah, this was a fun project that brought in a lot of different collaborators and so forth. The handlebars did get stolen. We're going to replace them. And if they get stolen again, then they won't go back on. There's a certain amount of risk with public art. You can't let it stop you. If something happens, you fix it and move on. This is a project also that we did in collaboration with Jennifer Uch, and I hope we'll keep her in our thoughts at this time. Next slide, please. There was a new fire hydrant that went in on campus recently, and whoever installed it left quite a lot of slurry around it. It wasn't really very cleaned up, and so the art club immediately jumped in and went in, cleaned it up, polished it, did a little bit of fussing around. It turned out that the very next day the crew came in to clean it up. We didn't know they were coming back. But the point is that we're ready to jump in, and we've got the safety gear and the numbers, and so here we are. Next slide, please. This is not necessarily so related to infrastructure, but it has been a public project, and it certainly relates to civic conversations and issues that are large in our minds, spending our time on school campuses, that we know that this is a possibility at any moment. And so this is one of the ways that we have responded by building these desks. And this was originally prompted by the Raven Theater, but it's something that we've continued to do over the years. And Andrea, would you mind saying just a little word about the project?
Me and my friends decided to join because we thought this was really important to speak out. At the time, a few months back, there was a school shooting, and I guess what made me want to join was that my cousin at the time had a threat at her school too, and we've been having threats at our school. So maybe I thought that speaking out on this or making an art project about it would show that we're still thinking about this, or that this could keep going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next slide, please. So this was something that was a combined project between the Healdsburg High Art Department and Marcy Becerra. We made the switch for the tree a couple of years ago. And then this year we were asked to do the presents and make them more permanent. This was a lesson to me about reading the email before you say yes. I really thought that we were going to be wrapping oversized cardboard boxes in the classroom, and then the day before Thanksgiving break, here comes the mountain of plywood on the back of a truck. So it was kind of a desperate pace. 3 days, and the students at Marcy Becerra really stepped up and kind of pulled my fat out of the fryer, and we managed to get 4 of these done in a very short period of time. And I'd like to turn it over to Savannah just briefly.
Hi. I'm saying about the boxes. This was definitely something I wasn't expecting. I was definitely expecting to get cardboard boxes to wrap, and it was definitely a surprise to get full sheets of wood and only have 3 days to complete it all. But we worked every single hour. I even stayed like 4 extra hours after school trying to get these complete. But it was a lot of fun bouncing ideas back and forth. Like the bows were supposed to be solid colors, but Tor accidentally painted one wrong, so we changed that. But it was definitely a lot of fun. One of my favorite projects because I just love painting and like hand-based learning. Like I like to do stuff with my hands. Well, thank you.
And I can just attest, probably an hour after they flipped the switch, I was at home. I live in Windsor and have kids, and I wasn't able to be there, but Savannah was just elated. She was there when they flipped the switch, and she was like, oh my God. It has a crazy impact when kids see their work in the community. Actually, it's a low-key secret way to get them civically involved without telling them they have to be civically involved.
TOR's program involves something called Big Picture Learning, and it's based on real-world experience, internships, being out in the world, getting off campus. And one of the wonderful things about it is that there's flexibility within the schedule, which for us would be kind of a nimble curriculum that I don't always have. And so having the Marcy Becerra students be able to step up in moments like these where I've overextended myself horribly is just a really great thing. And I think it's a good experience for them as well. Thank you. Next slide, please. We do conventional projects as well. Here's a mural that's 3 years overdue, but you know, it's somewhat presentable, and we keep at it. It'll get finished. But you know, this is typically what people think of as public art, but there are other dimensions to it that we're interested in as well. Next slide, please. you know, there's, as part of the ACMP, there's a little bit of a call for more public art that fits into the conventional definition of what public art looks like. And it can be done very nicely. I think that there's a concern on people's part that, you know, public art involves kicking over a can of paint in an intersection and doing groovy finger painting and stuff like that, and that it's going to be a big mess. But with the Arts and Culture Commission seated, we have a very solid group of very capable, qualified curators that are going to be able to, I think, ensure that the work that is approved and that goes out is going to be really nice. And when it's done well and it's working, I think that it has a lot of value. People appreciate it. They feel that there's appreciation for the community. And when visitors see it, they think, wow, this place is one that cares about itself. Next slide, please. What I'm interested in, however, is something a little bit more subtle. If you look at the road spray up there, from a distance, it doesn't look like anything modified. It's just a worn out patch of paint that referred to some project. But if you look closer, you'll see that it's got a little bit of a decorative border around it. This is not serving as a distraction to motor vehicle traffic or anything like that. It's just a little embellishment. It's something terribly subtle that most people would miss, which is fine. But those who see it will be left with a question. What's going on here? How come this is a little bit extra? And this is part of the kind of not only infrastructural, but public art that I think is interesting. One thing that Santa Rosa has begun to do is that when they repaint one of their curbs red, they've got a little city logo that they spray on it, and from a distance it looks like a signature. We could be doing this as well, but instead of just copying what they're doing, let's make it neighborhood specific. Let's start customizing these things and let us, as the art department, be part of getting out and actually doing these paintings. When an artist does it, it's going to be tight. It's going to be pristine. It will be done with extra care. It's going to look nice, and it creates opportunities for us to get out and for people to have a sense of ownership over what they see as they drive and walk through town. And so this, when I talk about public art, this is really what's going on in my mind is not necessarily murals and splashy conventional stuff, but literally repainting parking lots and turning it into a form of fine art. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Some of the Marcy students are interning with a construction company, and one of the things that they're doing is building chicken coops. And we thought, well, we've been doing some 3D printing lately. Wouldn't it be cool if they took their project, 3D printed them, and one of the applications could be that we could make the rat traps out in town look much nicer if they had a protective covering that was a replica of a project that students are working on. Next slide, please. One of my recent passions is restoring postal boxes. If we were to do such a thing in Healdsburg, it would be done with permission, of course. This was just a spontaneous little touch-up. It turns out that there is not an official postal blue, which was really surprising to me. And so you can go to the paint store and get anything that looks the part. So I went and found this beautiful, vibrant blue. And you can't see it in the slide, but if you look at the name of this particular color, it is work of art. So when you put this label on a mundane object, you elevate it somehow. And in the process of elevating it, you also elevate its surroundings. You create conversations, and you do this. And you may think, well, this is strange and it doesn't go anywhere. But, you know, look back to the precedent in Andy Warhol painting a can of chicken soup that produced endless books, and millions of dollars have changed hands over just the phenomenon of elevating banal objects in and of itself. We could do that, you know, throughout town. I'm referring to it as hand-painted Healdsburg. And, you know, we can't do it too extensively, but we can do it here and there. And as the word gets out, it becomes a cool feature of the town. Next slide, please. One of the big projects and really exciting things that we're working on right now is a project called Your River Downtown, which I began to work on with artist Hugh Livingston, who is here with us and also a member of the creative leadership team. The goal was to start with his work, which is digital informatics, animated data regarding the river and so forth, and adding to it videos, stills, running these on screens out in town to bring the river closer into town and to get people more involved with it and hopefully in its protection. Next slide, please. The very first screen has already gone in at the Wellness Center at Healdsburg High Campus. The next one is going in at the Boys and Girls Club. Hopefully the next one after that will be the Senior Center. We've got an issue with power to work out, but hopefully that will be manageable. Next slide, please. Here's what a typical Thursday is beginning to look like at the Marcy Becerra Academy. We designate a couple of locations. Students go out, take a portrait of the site, water temperature, water samples, soil samples, mud samples, recording the most recent rain, year fall totals to date to get a sense of where the flow is. Mapping the soils, taking samples home, documenting all the plants that we find, both native, invasive, traditional, and if there are any animals that pop up, that we try to record those. In the process of doing the field work for the river projects, it came to light that there is not already an atlas of the Russian River watershed. We're referring to it as the Ashikauna to try to honor the indigenous place names. And so we've taken this on as a book project that we hope to publish and expect it to take the next several years. Next slide, please. Much of the river tributaries go dry in the dry months. The main channel used to do this, and it probably will again in the near future when they temporarily stop the diversion. Below it is what's called the hyperhaic zone, and it's got water in it. It's teeming with life, hibernating fish fry, microscopics. We recreated it in the classroom, and then from it, we're taking samples that we would look at on a microscope and look for swimmers and things that are down there and underneath that dry layer on the surface. Next slide, please. There's a lot of mapping involved. This is a map of Fitch Mountain that's painted with the actual soil types in each of its sections. And next slide, please. And we're working on a hand-painted map of the entire watershed, done in the same style with the dirt in the right locations with the different soils. There are about 65 different varieties. Next slide, please. We come across in our fieldwork a lot of unnamed creeks, and we would like to begin to name some of them. Here's one where the neighborhood association got together. I'm pretty sure they had permission from the city, but I don't think that they went through the USGS application process to get it on maps, which is what we'd like to do with at least a couple of them. And we're reaching out to our indigenous advisors and guest teachers for some advice about how to proceed. Next slide, please. I think we're running out of time, but we're almost done. Along with the Atlas projects are a variety of other physical art projects that go along with it. Here is what we're calling our flow meter. It's a banner that's going to have a Pacific lamprey and some salmon painted on it. There it is when it was first finished at the low point, about 2.5 feet under Memorial Bridge, and during more exciting times, out it will come periodically to create some visual excitement. Next slide. So these river projects continue, and this is the main thing that we're working on, which is bringing in a lot of our students, especially those from Marcy Becerra Academy. It involves participating in river cleanups. It involves stealing students from science classes periodically. There's Henry and Ross doing a presentation at Enso Village back in October, which was a big hit. They were the stars of the evening. That was really fun. And then there's Tor and our Marcy kids out by the river doing the field work, and it's just a very, very exciting time and a process to be involved in. I sent earlier a couple of slides that were missing, and you may have noticed that we were out excavating whale skeletons on campus that we recovered from a breakwater in Richmond. We buried it in the garden at school for 3 years, let the microbes clean it. We dug it up again about a week ago, and we have scanned it and 3D printed it. And at your table just now, there are some fishing flies that were created by taking the 3D scan of the whale vertebrae and turning it into a hand-tied fishing fly. As part of the river projects, look for the Leroy Danhausen Memorial Fishing Derby coming up. And for those of you that want to participate, you've got a piece of fishing tackle ready to go. Did those get moved? No. Oh. Well, if anybody catches a salmon with a whale, it'll be a first, I think. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. And thank you so much to my kids for being here and helping out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. The creativity is amazing. I love to see the opportunities that you're providing too. So thank you. All right. So now we'll move on to city manager reports.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a time-specific public hearing, so I will actually forego that report. Thank you.
Yes, it is 6:30. So we will, let me switch to that page here. We go back to afterwards. Okay. Public hearing. Specific time, 6:30. This is the third public hearing to receive community input and provide direction to staff regarding the submitted draft maps and sequence of elections for district-based elections. And we have city manager to introduce and Paul Mitchell.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll make just a very brief introduction and we'll move into the public hearing this evening. This, as you'll see in the slides coming up, is public hearing number 3 of 5 required public hearings on the process of moving toward district. I think in many ways, I think I probably said this before in this process, but this feels like where the rubber hits the road. And this is a challenging, exciting, important, challenging part of the process. We, as you well know, and I think the community is generally familiar, began the process with introductory information and overviews of the legal environment, and then moved into the process of allowing the community to start submitting and drawing maps. And the council is very much familiar with that because you have the better part of, I think, 80 maps between those drawn by the demographer and the community that were published in accordance with the requirements 10 days ago and included in your packet. And so this is an important part of the process, to be sure. Also a challenging part, and we as staff, I think, will be mindful, especially tonight, of trying to be of assistance and be helping and working with the council as we whittle down. We do also feel, and I'll just share a little bit of the pressure of the clock that dictates this process, even though we got a little bit of forbearance and have more time than the minimum allowed by California law, are still moving toward a requirement to wrap this process up. So we're at a really important point tonight where the council has the immense challenge of taking roughly 80 maps that are before you and providing feedback so that we can whittle that down as we move toward the next public hearing, the 4th. And the hope is, we're not going to put a number to this tonight, but the hope is that we really can have enough feedback from the council to have a pretty short list. And I'm, intentionally not put a number on that right now, and I think we can be a little bit flexible about that. That allows the council at that 4th public hearing to really lean into a small number of maps. You'll look at borders today, I'm sure, and that's totally appropriate, but at that point, really lean in with the microscope and try to reach a point of getting comfortable with those maps so that by the time we get to the 5th and final public hearing, we've been able to notice to the community something that we feel good about and we think reflects the will of the council and is something that will be ready for approval at that 5th hearing, because that is when the voting occurs. So this is a very challenging public hearing. What we're committed to trying to do, I know our consultant and us as staff is try to work with the council, because there's a lot of maps, there's a lot of data, and I'm sure you'll have a lot of different ideas, a lot of questions, a lot of feedback, and we'll be looking for areas of agreement as you have that conversation. You'll hear the presentation first. I'm sure you'll have clarifying questions, and then we'll take public comment. And then as the council moves into the deliberations, we will do our best to support you in looking for those areas of agreement and trying to flag those so that we can arrive at, again, I'll not use a number, but a small number of either maps or variants on maps. You might have agreement that one map is close to what you all want. You may have some questions and ideas about how it could be different. We'll take that feedback, but we'll try to jump in as appropriate and look for places where we think there's some energy. It doesn't have to be the whole council. We don't need to kind of arrive at any complete points of agreement this evening, but looking at those areas where we think we have some energy and some amount of consensus that will get us to that short list. So this will be a tricky one. We're prepared to have what I think will be a lengthy conversation this evening about the different maps and the different alternatives and the implications therein. Obviously, you have maps, as you'll hear, with different numbers of districts, and that has different implications in terms of how the council is structured. But just to close where I started, the hope is to get down to a list where we can really focus on the details of a manageable number of options at the next public hearing. So we'll try to stay engaged in that conversation, but with that, I'll turn it over to Paul Mitchell from Redistricting Partners, who will walk you through the presentation with a little bit of background and then some summaries and thoughts on the maps that you've all seen.
Thank you very much, and thanks for having me. For those who don't know me, I'm Paul Mitchell. I'm the owner of Redistricting Partners, and we are happy to be working with the city on this project. We, like has been mentioned, have gotten a lot of input, so hopefully we'll be able to go through this presentation and then answer any questions and start to kind of figure out some decision points. So first off, even though we've talked about it before, I'm going to go over just kind of the basics in case some people are viewing for the first time. Talk a little bit about the redistricting principles, go over the public maps and the trends that we saw in the public maps. I'm also going to talk about some data in terms of what we see from the American Community Survey that was requested in a prior hearing. I'm going to go through draft maps that we created based on the public submissions and the trends that we saw that I'll have gone over in the PowerPoint, and then go over the rest of the hearing schedule and what's next. So in redistricting in California, we are following a set of kind of rules and process at the local level, which is meant to mirror what happens at the statewide level with the State Independent Redistricting Commission, where they draw districts based on making districts that are equally sized, making sure districts are contiguous, and maintaining communities of interest, which I want to kind of point out is really the most important part of this process, is working with the community to try to define what communities of interest are in the city, and then use those as the basis of drawing the maps for the city council. We also want to have maps that use easily identifiable lines and boundaries, like major roads like Healdsburg Avenue being something as an example that everybody knows where it is. If they saw a district line go down that, they'd say, oh, that makes sense. I'm not suggesting that you have to have a line that goes down that, but you know what I mean. It's like that idea of a map that they see making sense given their understanding of the footprint of the community. And then keeping districts compact. And compactness in California law is a little different than what we would think of in, like, you know, making a circle or a square a compact shape. It really is talking about the relationships of communities, keeping communities that are similar towards with each other, and not drawing districts that kind of bypass a nearby population to get some far away, strange, far distant population. So we did have 78 districtor maps drawn prior to the 7-day posting deadline. The way the state law works is you're allowed to consider any maps that have been posted for 7 days. And the idea with that is we want to make sure that the public has as much input on the process. They can make comments on the maps you're going to discuss. If we had the community draw 80 almost maps, and then we came in here and somebody said, oh, I made a map last night, I want us all to talk about this, it would kind of shortchange the community's ability to give good input. One thing we saw here was a variety of different maps that were drawn in terms of the number of districts. So a dozen districts that were 6 district maps, 39 that were 5 district maps, 26 that were 4 district maps, and 1 map that was just 1 district, which is fine. And I want to make sure we understand that when the public's submitting these maps, they're not held to the same rigorous rules that I am. The public could draw a map and they could draw, you know, they don't have to be all equal population. They could draw maybe 1 or 2 of the districts they like and not draw anything for the rest of the city. They can do things to express their own input on the process, and then you can utilize the information the public gives you to help draw a legal, you know, meeting all the rules map. So Any maps that were drawn after that 7-day deadline, we can discuss at a future meeting. They'll all be posted just like the ones that we have today. And at any point, if there's a map that you like and you say, hey, Paul, map 72583, can you bring that up and can we make that map D, like as a map that we want to consider? Then we can do that. And if any point the council says, hey, map A, throw that away. We don't like that at all. We never want to see it again. We'll just put it to the side and we don't have to consider it as one of the kind of live maps that we're really focusing on. So let me talk about the themes that we saw in some of these maps. And I got here a little early today. I brought my bike. I threatened Jeff I would do this. I rode one of the draft plans today. So I got all into the community to kind of feel it out. Really loved the experience of doing that, and you have an amazing community. But one of the first things we see in the themes is this northern part of the city. In most maps, it's kind of put in one district. And what's interesting is you have different things in that one district. Up in Chiquita Avenue or whatever that road is, you have huge lots and vineyards. Then you go the Enzo Village, the retirement community right there. And then you go a little further and you see streets lined with kind of the smaller lot, postage stamp lot kind of homes. And that's all in this northern part. In a perfect world, you'd have districts that represented those different communities. But the fact is we have to draw districts that are compact, that are equal population. And as a result, most people, when they draw the map, they kind of draw a northern district that encompasses different types of communities, but because of the other requirements of districting, they're all kind of put together. So we see that northern part of the city drawn, as you can see in all these different maps, different examples of that northern part. Essentially what it looks like most people are doing is drawing it to meet the population requirement. Once they get to the population requirement, they stop and they start drawing the remainder of the districts. We also see that on the southern part of the city. We see a lot of people are drawing maps where they're coming up to Matheson, Fitch Road, and going across. And there's different varieties of that, but for the most part, we don't see people splitting that southern part too much. A lot of maps are having that whole inclusive southern portion. On the west side, we see a variety of two different things. One is, like I mentioned earlier, having Healdsburg Avenue be kind of a dividing line for that western side. The other is there's census blocks that come down. Is it the slow, or like is there a railroad or something there that comes down? It looks as though they're using that as a dividing line to draw a further west district like this, where it's a thinner western district. So you have some that are kind of a fatter, smaller western district, with Healdsburg largely as the defining boundary, and others that are having this longer, narrower district. One of the things that we can see in this data is some of the rationale for some of the lines and the ways that they're drawn. And in fact, in this right here, I'm going to show you one thing that really speaks to one of the more important factors of the line drawing process here. And that is when we look at these areas, this one on the left, the green one, this is homeowners. The darker it is, the higher the homeowner rate, the lighter color it is, the more renters. The one on the right-hand side is the median income. The lighter is lower income and the darker is higher income. Now I want to say these are based on census block groups, so they're kind of big areas. There might be 1,500 people in each of these areas, or 2,000 or 3,000 people in one of these areas, so it's really averaged out. You have areas, like I mentioned earlier, where in this northern area, you might go in between seeing vineyards and a retirement community and a street lined with small single-family homes, all in this sense, this map, it's kind of merging all that data together. So these are averages. When we look at this, I want you to look here at this western side, along the western side of the city, where you have this census block group area with lower homeowner rates and with lower median income. And then look right here, you have this area. This is above the high school. There's kind of this, you know, like the pussycat ears here. I think that's Alexandria Drive or something like that that creates that. This area here and this area here are both kind of the more renter heavy and more lower income. And in the data, when you open up the mapping, it's very heavily Latino. So you have more heavily Latino populations here, and then along the western side, and then in here where you see more renters, there's also around Matheson, there's more Latino population. When we look at age, again, this is potentially interesting, but it could be a little bit fuzzy because you're averaging together. The area with the senior citizen home is average age of 31, the lowest age of the entire city. That's not because of the 200 people or something like that living in the senior center. It's because of everybody else. So this could be interesting, but it's not granular enough really to, I think, be as informative as one might want. So when we look at the draft maps, especially having just seen those maps and looked at the themes, I want to kind of go through these first draft maps that we've created based on all the mapping we've seen. First off, this draft map A, the total population deviation, the size difference from the largest district to the smallest district is 8.1, and I'll show that breakdown. It creates compact northern and southern districts. On the west, it keeps together this west of Healdsburg Avenue and then cuts in here to that area. I'll show it as a bigger map here. Cuts in here above the high school into this area where you see a lot of like apartment complexes. So you have this area with more apartment complexes and single family homes, and then this western side. This district here, District 2, is the most Latino district, 36%. The deviation of the district is the difference between the smallest and largest districts, and that comes in at 8.1. Now we also have District 3 at 23% Latino. And if we look at where that is, that's right here in the middle of the city. And it's the southern portion of this middle of the city that, based on the census data, has the highest population, highest density of Latinos. You can't really take this area here and like dive down and grab this area here to make a more Latino district because it wouldn't be compact. And it's barely more than that 33%. Draft Plan B, 8.7% deviation against, again, a compact northern and southern district boundaries. And the District 4 is taking in some of that input from the homeowners and income data sets. And then, of course, we're looking at the other issues of renters, homeowners, and income levels. So again, this District 2 is similar to the district that we saw in the earlier map in Plan A. District 3 is a more downtown or more central district. District 5 here is the southern district. District 1 is the northern district. So it kind of follows the same patterns as A. 8.7% total plan deviation. 32% is the most Latino district. And districts 1 and 3 are both over 20%. So a little different than the other plan in that District 1 and 3 here are over 20% Latino. Now, Draft Plan C is significantly different than the other two. Draft Plan C, the deviation is just under 7%. It creates a compact north district, but the western district, it does that narrower western district that we saw a lot of the other maps do. And it creates two central districts. And you can see here, we have District 2 coming all the way under here. So a very different kind of relationship. It goes to Fitch. Is it called Fitch Mountain Road? Yeah. So Fitch Mountain Road, and then there's this little dive down because of population here, and then it comes across to Matheson. So this has two districts here that are more the central districts. You do have this District 1, you know, kind of diving across here a little bit to just for population equality. But the most critical kind of main feature here is that District 2 is this narrow construction. When we look at what this does to the citizen voting age population, you see it at 31%. You see District 3 is at 24% citizen voting age population Latino. And then, of course, District 5 is at 22% because it has that southern portion of the downtown or central part of Latino population. So you see 3 districts again that are over 20% Latino population. So that's A, B, and C. So A, and then B is, that's southern, that 2 comes down. And then C, that 2 comes all the way down to the bottom. That's kind of a defining feature of these different plans. So where we're at right now is we had 2 map hearings before anybody started putting pen to paper on maps, anybody from our staff or anything like that. Then we had the public outreach hearing. This hearing is the first post-map hearing. So maps have been public for 7 days. We're now discussing them. The goal here is to get input, maybe drive the conversation, see which maps the public is really interested in, suggest some changes to any maps. And then we go to map hearing number 4. That is the critical hearing where we're going to start reducing the number of maps we're considering. It would be great if after map hearing 4, you have gotten some consensus around 1 map that you want to vote up or down at the 5th hearing, which is on April 7th. If you take 2 maps at that 5th hearing, that's probably okay too. At least the public has kind of an understanding of the finite options that are happening. If we go into district hearing number 5 and there's 80 maps still being considered, then I'm gonna, have a little bit of a panic attack because the public might not know which map are we really debating about. It's really critical to get to a small number, 1 ideally maps at that 4th hearing. So if there are maps that you kind of feel are more preferable, then we can use those as kind of jumping off point. If you want to look at changes, I could bring up Districtor. We could look at what happens if we try to move around population. And we can get from you direction on new maps. And if we get map B and you like it, but you want to change 2 things, we could do a map B2. And then you could say, oh, well, what happens if you do this other thing? Make a map B3. We could take a map that's map 78534 and make it map D. We could make a map F. If you say you don't like A, B, and C, I'm not going to be hurt. That's not my job here. I'm not trying to win the mapping competition. But what I am trying to do is elicit the kind of conversations, hopefully, that help us get to a final map. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that. Yeah, we have a lot of maps to sort through. Takes hours and hours to do that, right? I wonder if we could just, if the council's okay to just ask clarifying questions at this point, then we'll open it up to the public and then we can come back and deliberate more about the individual maps. Do we have any, I see Councilmember Kelly's hands up. Would you like to speak, please?
Yes, I just have a quick question. So, for example, on your, the Redistricting Partners draft, trying to figure out what letter this is, draft C. And if you zoom in on the bottom, like where purple and whatever the top color is come together, peach, on the right, you see something that kind of looks like maybe the tip of Florida way above the number 4. And I was curious, so there's a grouping of homes up there. It's like Highland Circle and the area at the top of March Avenue. And it's my understanding that those homes are in a census block that is attached to the area kind of on the other side of Powell, which is, you can't get there by car because of the way the roads are, but they are in the same census block. And so those folks, travel March Avenue. That's how the only way they can get to their homes, but they're being put in a different district than the folks, quote unquote, down the hill from them at Fitch Mountain Villas. And so I'm curious, can we cut an existing census block track to put homes or residents with their quote unquote neighbors if they're not in the same census, or I don't know, I'm probably using the wrong lingo with respect to census, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So let me first address the contiguity question, because in some states, there's a rule about travel contiguity, meaning that you can get from here to there without having to leave the district and go back in. We don't have a travel contiguity standard in California, but it is something you could decide to consider. You could say, perfectly worded, hey, this community can't get to the other side of this. It's just that it's an odd census block arrangement. So as a result, we don't like this part of Plan C. But what we can't do is split a census block. We are required to use the data the state provides from the US Census, adjusted by a department at UC Berkeley. And census data, when I gave my first presentation, it is geography plus data. And the geography I described as like a honeycomb, and the data kind of fills each of those pieces of the honeycomb. If we were to cut a census block, all of a sudden we would be guessing as to what populations where. And as a result, we can't really split a census block. If there was a situation where there was a unpopulated census block and it was critical to the districting plan to do it, and there was no way to not do it, then like the technicality of it isn't something that we have a problem with. It's that the state law says that we have to use the census data. And so splitting census blocks is not something that is normally done in California. Some cities like LA routinely split census blocks, but that is not the ideal kind of city to follow in this regard.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you. And then really quick, my next question is about homeowners that are in the same HOA. So for example, Fitch Mountain Villas in Healdsburg on March Avenue has an existing HOA. They have shared common public space. They share a pool, they share a pickleball court, and they also share landscape costs. So is it important to keep that community together? Because right now in some of the maps, it looks like it's cut in half based on March Avenue.
So it's a great question, because the question is that a community of interest? And, you know, when we talked about communities of interest at the first hearing, it was, you know, is it a group that can identify what they are? They're the pickleball players or the skateboarders or the, you know, HOA. So they check, they accomplish that. Secondly, can they be mapped? And clearly you could map an HOA, so check mark, they accomplish that. The third was, do they as a community of interest have issues that come before the city council where you are impacting policies that are important to them? And that might be a check mark too. It might be that they or other HOAs have specific policy needs from the city that they might feel are or are not being addressed. So they could definitely be a community of interest. The question then becomes, if you were to say, I don't like this plan because it splits this HOA, I like this other plan that splits the X community. You're essentially creating a decision tree of, I prefer keeping the HOA together more than I prefer keeping the, you know, farming community together, just some other community of interest. So it's always a trade-off. So it's totally appropriate to say the community of interest I think we should be preserving here is the HOA. We've had cities that HOAs were the primary mapping they used when they drew their lines. But it's also totally legitimate for you to say, look, the HOA is going to be fine. If we end up having half in two different council districts, that's okay, because if we don't do that, we're going to split this other community of interest that also is really important in the process. So it's a decision for you.
Thanks so
Anyone
much.
else? Thank you. Anyone else have a clarifying question at this point? Councilmember Higley?
I like the presentation and how you did a lot of detail and clarity. I know for me, when I got all these maps, it was great to look at them and like you, like started to see themes. And then some of them, you know, I actually emailed everybody that had reached out to me at some point just to kind of, hey, did you submit a map? You know, what was your thought process behind it? Because even if it's like you said, you know, I went in and played around. I didn't submit one, but just to kind of get familiar. And I did what you said. I tried to get the population correct and just kind of see like, oh. And I think Councilmember Kelly pointed out the Fitch Mountain Villas, where I think we have a member of the audience that would be sliced into a different census block, but lives in that area. And that seemed kind of, odd, so see some of those things, but when you play with it, you start to see it. I think for me, for tonight, what I'm kind of looking for feedback from my fellow council members and the public is, I'm still up in the air. Like we're looking at this map, that district number 2. There were a number of them that went basically south and then followed way up north up to, in that case, all the way up to Chiquita. And then others were more sliced down, kept everything down below and went up a little bit more. So I'm interested in hearing the feedback from the community. Some of the feedback that I heard was, well, historically that's kind of been, a different area or something like that, which kind of, to me, sounded a little bit about, like I've spoken before about Parkland Farms where, oh, that's Cloverdale South. Like, well, this Healdsburg's downtown, that's, up there kind of thing. No, it's not that case anymore, but I'd heard that back in the day. So I want to be careful about the historical things versus where we are now. The other thing you mentioned about the age and like in this map, District 1 was, I do want to confirm, like Enzo Village is not part of the census that is determining this because they did not exist in 2020.
No, definitely not they are in the American Community Survey because that's ongoing.
Okay.
But if that wasn't there, I'm not aware of when they started. I know there's a whole bunch of new construction there too, so it looks like they're expanding. But the 2020 census, it's who was there then.
Yeah.
And when I looked, it looked like they said that they have, 200 people-ish or something like that. They're going up to 300 people-ish. So that might be a population that is there but not reflected in the census, meaning that there is this kind of hidden extra 200 people there in that census, in that area based on the census. But there might also be the same thing in other parts of the city. There might be somewhere else where, density has been increased in District 3 in this map, where maybe some of those apartments or multifamily housing units have had greater density or greater or lower vacancy rates,
So from my perspective, that's something I think about when we're doing this now in 2025. We have another census coming up, and then we all have to kind of redraw the lines based on that. So there's going to be some movement on these lines in 5, 7, or whatever that is, whatever the time. So, that's one thing. The other interesting comment that I read was initially I'd heard the comment about, larger parcels, which I didn't think much about, but you're right. When you're taking Chiquita area and then you're going down Grove Street, you have properties that, looking back over the last couple of years when we're discussing water rates and some of these other things where the perspective of that, is, it's a part of Healdsburg, so it's, I think that it was an interesting thing that, oh, okay, I could see how that ties together. Because initially when I saw the maps and I would see some that would tie from the north all the way down the side, I was like, well, what's the commonality there? And then, so it was nice to see all these maps and kind of think about some of the things that you pointed out. One question I had was, we have maps submitted that are, there are a number of 4 District 1s, 5 and 6 that I kind of circled just, in general. And I think most of them boil down to generally a couple different styles, right? So I'm wondering if it's something where, we get to kind of the general idea. And again, I want to hear from my fellow council members on like in this case, District 2 going that much, or should it be split lower? I feel like that's good input. But then would you then be able to say, all right, we kind of have an idea of like, this is kind of what we want, to then take that and, apply it to 4, 5, 6, and potentially, I mean, there's a discussion about 7 districts at one point. So that now that we have all this data, when it comes back to us, we are looking at all of them and we can, really have a good discussion about this, or this.
Yeah. So, first off, identifying the themes is really important, and identifying parts of the maps that you like and don't like can be really helpful. Going to 6 districts or 7 districts adds complexity, and it's kind of like going from as you increase the number of districts, you're not just increase, it's not linear. It's almost exponential, the impact of one more district and one more district after that. And the question about the number of districts, I know is one that you've been listening to the community and thinking about a lot. To me, there's first a binary question of, are you gonna have an at-large mayor or not? And then if you're gonna have an at-large mayor, from our drawing, it does seem that, you know, you have this 4 to 6 question, and 6 and more than 6 seems to be kind of more problematic to draw districts that are compact and rational. 4 districts actually draws pretty nicely. But the 5 district scenario is one that I think has been discussed the most, had the most public. If you were to stay as a city council without an at-large mayor, having a rotating mayor, 5 to me does seem way more preferable than 7. And so, but if you were to say, hey, we really like keeping the community above the high school there, that dense population together, and we think that that dense population should go with the western part of a district. You could draw something like that based on that instruction across all the different potential numbers. If you were to say, we want to keep the Fitch Mountain Road together and draw something that goes there south, you could draw that across a number of districts, but you're really multiplying the complexity of the question at that point. It'd be great if you were able to come to a kind of understanding of the number of districts you're going to be considering for that 4th hearing in order to reduce the complexity.
Okay, thank you. I think I'm intrigued by, you know, where you have some of the higher Latino areas, and, you know, the idea, one of the emails that we got was like, okay, well, maybe there's 2 districts that are higher in Latino population. So that's kind of where I came from. And then the final one that I kind of wanted to get feedback on was downtown. So in my mind, I'm like, is that 1 district? Should that be split? Is it, you know, some of these go pretty far up. I think some go to like to the plaza, and then south for whatever the lower district is. And so, you know, and it's hard when you're just looking at this, you've really got to like zoom in. But it's just like conceptually, I'm trying to, you know, think in my mind back to your example of the 49er stadium, and there's an impact. You know, we've heard from neighbors about parking in the area, and, you know, that's kind of in my mind is like, okay, a topic of discussion amongst us, and then maybe from the public, is should that be 1 district or should it be split up? So those are some of my questions with the stage that we're at right now.
There's a lot of history around the drawing of downtown areas in redistricting at city level. And most of it has to do with that idea of, it's called a negative externality. The impact that having the downtown has on the neighbors, whether it's traffic. There's also positive externalities, like you can walk to go get an ice cream. Like there's good things that come from living near the downtown. There's negative things. And the state law has really been driven by the idea of identifying those communities of interest and drawing them together, in part because there was a history, even, it sounds silly, but the state legislature looks at places like the city of Sacramento. They all can talk about the city of Sacramento because they're all there all the time. And the history of the city of Sacramento was that they would take the downtown area and draw it into every council district. And so when the lawmakers were looking at the state law around the Fair Maps Act, they were talking about things like, okay, in downtown areas, do we want those to be drawn together, or do we want them to be split up so everybody cares a little bit about the downtown area? And if you view the downtown here as being a core community of interest, and you identify the fact that there are these external effects that the people who live there have to feel, while everybody else maybe benefits from the downtown, there's one community that uniquely has to feel the negative effects of it, then it's probably would justify making that a core part of the mapping plan to make sure that there is a downtown district. I don't think a lot of the maps split up the downtown entirely. I think it's almost a natural occurrence from the drawing of a western district, the drawing of a northern district. What's going to be the next piece you draw? It's going to be a central district. And so we see that in a lot of plans. But I think that if somebody were to come up to the microphone and say, hey, here's my districting plan, and I took the downtown and drew it into all 5 districts, that probably wouldn't be within the spirit of the Fair Maps Act.
Mm-hmm.
Council members, if I could just jump in for a second, I want to build on something perspective of having managed a city that had districts and had one district over the downtown. One thing I'd just suggest, kind of thinking about, is that over time, I think areas and districts start to become sort of the purview of the council district where it lies, and council members tend to defer to the council member who represents that area for matters that relate to that geographic area. And in my experience, that can get a little tricky in the issue of downtown for some of the reasons that Paul mentioned. It becomes a community that has interests and issues that pop up, right? We spend at our very next council meeting, we will be talking about complicated zoning issues that relate to the downtown area. And of course, you want the whole council, as we'll have, to be engaged on that. But what I have observed just that happens is that there does tend to be a little bit of deference to the district where the downtown is. And I think that, I don't want to steer you on how downtown ends up. I think there's a number of perfectly acceptable ways that could happen. But I have seen it happen, that it sort of starts to be that person's, and sometimes these council seats become kind of personalized over time, area. And I think there's at least some downside to that, right? Because we think of this as, we should be thinking of it, and I think we do, as everybody's downtown. Now, as you just heard, and I totally agree, there's no way to cut these districts where you'll have a little slice of 4, 5, 6, 7, however many districts grabbing downtown. But I do see some value in looking for some sort of shared ownership, and ownership's the wrong word, but responsibility for that area. So there's not a right answer here, but I just wanted to share that perspective that I've seen it happen where the council starts to defer to one of its members as kind of the voice of downtown, and that may or may not.
Yeah, and I think it's more just conceptually trying to, kind of thinking out loud. And the other thing that popped up is, when we're talking about, whether it's the tracks or Healdsburg Avenue is kind of the line. I go back to Measure O when, I was out talking to people, and we had like an housing overlay district that we kind of sketched out. And then you start to hear feedback from people that are just outside of it. Well, this might impact me. I have a concern. And so it's that kind of thing where when I'm looking at these lines, yeah, Healdsburg Avenue seems like a great straight shot, but I don't know. It's just, those are the things that are kind of going through my head. I just wanted to share with everybody what's going through my head as I'm looking at this process, and I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback and from the public, and emails. Anybody can always email me too. So thank you.
Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, your heat map was much easier than me going through and putting it all into a spreadsheet. Hours of that.
Oh my Lord.
I had a question. What number was was there a paper map submitted?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it might be on the website, right?
There was one paper map submitted. I am not aware of what number that was turned in.
That was my question. Okay.
Yeah, I do understand that it was digitized and it's in there. I also don't know which number that corresponds to, but it was.
All right, great. Thank you.
So if we, Vice Mayor, do you have any questions, or are you ready to go to public? Okay, so we'll open up the public hearing, go to public comment. Oh, I'm sorry, Ariel or Councilmember Kelly?
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly say that with respect to anyone who's watching or looking at the slides for the conversation about the plaza and downtown, the word Healdsburg on those draft maps is literally written right across the plaza. So when we just had draft map A up, the word Healdsburg, which is in the bottom left corner of District 3 and District 2 and District 5, that is where the plaza is, to help people kind of orient around these maps since it's hard to see the street names. But right where, if you go back to that last slide you were just on, draft A, yep, right where 2, 3, and 5 come together and there's a word Healdsburg right there on the left, that is where the plaza is. Not there, nope. Sure. But right at the intersection of those 3 districts, if that helps.
Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. Because I was looking for the plaza myself on some of these maps and couldn't quite figure it out, but
On the website, we have not just the cover page and the data table, but we have each individual district. And on those, you can look at each individual district a little more blown up. And if the public's looking, one of the things I love doing, I actually was doing this when I was out on my ride today, is you go to the website, there's a link to the map. You can see an online map, you can type in any address. So I was coming down Healdsburg Avenue and I was just typing the address of like the dealership and then of another store and like figuring out where exactly I was on the map. So you can do that too, to find any locations.
great, thank you. So I want to open up the public hearing. Do we have any, officially open it up? If we have any people who would like to make comment at this time, please come forward. Welcome.
Evening, council members. My name is Hank Skewis. I live in aforementioned Fitch Mountain Villas. And you have my permission to split it up if it makes it easier to draw the maps. So actually, I don't have a lot of strong feelings about this. I submitted a 5-district map, which Councilman Hagley shot me some questions about the other day, and I answered him. And I realized that would indicate that we'd continue to have a rotating mayor. I know some people feel like an at-large mayor would be a good thing, and I tend to agree that it might be, but that would be a 6 or a 4 district map. And I noticed the only maps that were shown up here tonight were 5. I did the 5-district map just because it was just a way to start. And I did pretty well with it. I came out with under 5% deviation. And I was looking for population, strictly population. I wasn't looking for anything else. I kind of like the idea, as time has gone on, I've kind of come to the idea that an at-large mayor would be a good thing. So I would tend to prefer maybe a 6-district map rather than a 5. 4 might work too, I don't know. I think the speaker mentioned that 4 works out really well for the city, map-wise, but and that would be fine. But I think I have more interest in an at-large mayor versus a rotating mayor than I do the number of districts. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Mitchell, Vice Mayor Herod, and council members. Good to see you all. I didn't prepare a map, but I did spend some time looking at the maps that were prepared. And I found that many of them, and again, I didn't realize that they weren't necessarily going to meet the rules about it. So I looked at about 10 of them, and none of them seemed to solve the problem in my eyes. So I focused more on the draft A, B, and C ones that the consultant prepared. So to me, one of the most important considerations is the coordination of areas so that there weren't obvious incongruities as to what a district consists of. And for instance, I believe it's important that all of the downtown commercial zoning district is within one district, because I believe that is a community of interest. I do understand what Mr. Kay was talking about, because that's exactly what's happened in San Francisco, where there are specific areas that are getting much more attention than others. Many of the plans divided the downtown with a district boundary, for instance, the center of the street. So like one of them, I think it was map A, District A, the plazas, there's this bug here, I'm so sorry. The plazas in District 3, but to the south across Matheson Street then is in the rest of the downtown to the south is in District 5. And it seemed a little odd to me that, any shop owner on Matheson Street would have different interests than someone on another part of the north part of the plaza. So that didn't seem to make a lot of sense. It's the historic part of Healdsburg, and that's most likely a consistent area from the standpoint of constituency. The same thing with map A, draft A, because Matheson Street was one of the dividers. So it goes through the historic district of Matheson Street, where either side of the street would have the same kind of interest, and as a historic district would be a community of interest for those homeowners. So to me, draft C came the closest to dividing the areas in town into districts that seem to have alignment. For instance, early and pre-World War II development is all in District 5. Suburban style single-family homes are all in District 4. Large developments like Parkland Farms are in District 1. And all of the commercial, business, and multifamily zones and smaller homes are in District 2, including the entire downtown. That's all in one district. The Fitch Mountain Villas was one that, as soon as Councilmember Kelly talked about it, I thought, oh, well, she's just reading my mind. It seemed like the city boundary is just at the north side of the Fitch Mountain Villas. So if it could all be in District 4, again, I don't know what the variation would be, if that would be a problem population-wise, but then all of it is all in the same district. So that seemed to be pretty straightforward. Okay, I seem to be out of time. I don't envy your role in doing all this, so I wish you the best of luck, but thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Linda Cade, Sawmill Circle. And I did do a map, but I thought I was doing a 6-district map, and I was focusing on the number of people, because I feel like there's Hispanics in every district, and I don't see what the person who, I don't see that they're just located in those 2 areas. Also, there's low-income people in each of the areas. There's apartments with Hispanics and other low-income people. And what about other races? I feel like it's pretty racist trying to figure out how to group people. And anyway, I feel like it's more appropriate just to do it by the numbers. But when I was finished, I mean, I submitted it and it was on the last day, so I'm hoping maybe we can submit another one. My 6 districts only came out as 4 because number 4 got bumped somehow. So it came out as a 5-district, but I wanted it to be 6. And so I'm also on board with the elected mayor. So if 4 is easier to do that, then I would be open to the 4-district too. But I wonder how many other people tried to do the 6 and the same thing happened where a number got bumped out, but the 6 was still in there, but it was only 5 districts. So that's a potential glitch that happened to me. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Mark McMullen from Parkland Farms. I just wanted to say that I wanted to reiterate that I am in favor of an elected mayor. I think that putting that power in the hands of the voters is a very important thing for the future. I think that looking at what we have done in the past shows that to have an elected mayor and to have that extra voice that we could elect outside of just a one voice every 4 years is very important. So I would rather see, I'd rather see 6 districts or 4 districts if that's the way you go, but I definitely think that an elected mayor is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good evening, Marilyn Joyce. So I sent a lot of my ideas and thoughts about this to each of you, and I feel like the whole process got a little bit cooked back in December when, as a council, you went in the direction of 5 districts, rotating mayor. And even though it didn't have to be decided that night, that was kind of decided. And then in the January meeting, when you came back, you opened it up again, but then sort of closed it up again at the end of that meeting. So I feel like the public has never really heard any substantial deliberations or discussion around an elected mayor and even districts 4 or 6. I did a map with 6 districts, and it was an interesting process to see that there were 2 areas of the city in a 6-district map that could be heavy Latino population. And that kind of mirrors our population, what is it, 37, no, 40, 60, 30, 70, 34, 68 or whatever. So I guess I want to say that I feel like the process has been channeled to this 5-district rotating mayor. A rotating mayor with district elections means that your mayor may have only received a few hundred votes in a city, but they're now the mayor. And my focus is always a democratic process. And I feel that if we're voting only in our district every 4 years, then the population of Healdsburg is not really engaged in that democratic process on a regular basis. Whereas if we voted for a mayor, we'd have more ownership. You use that word. Maybe not the best word. We'd have more involvement in our city and in the process of choosing our leaders. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak? Not seeing anybody rush up here. We've had I think most people have spoken, so we'll close this public hearing and bring it back to council. Get to use my gavel. So as I understand, we're going to want to talk about the different maps, and we are hoping that the council members have identified several or 2 or 3 or whatever that they'd like to speak about. So who'd like to start us off with this process? I don't see her hand. Somebody. Oh, I see. Ariel. Thank you.
I just had a question, you know, please forgive me if this is inappropriate, but I wanted to just ask, you know, as we're narrowing in and per some of the commentary that the commenters made, can we as a council just get clarity about how many districts we are leaning towards? And so that way we can kind of reduce the universe of options. It's my understanding that a majority of the council previously did, you know, in prior council meetings, we talked about having 5 districts. And I just wanted to find out if that's still where everybody is at as a straw poll, just so that we can kind of, there are, you know, so many great maps that were submitted, so many different numbers of districts. You know, what we're looking at that Redistricting Partners created was based on our direction of where we left it at the last council meeting. But it's also been interesting to see now all of the different maps and the different options that people created. And so I just wanted to, if it's possible, to just get a straw poll just so we can be more clear about, you know, narrowing our universe of options, because there are so many options kind of in front of us.
Is the council prepared to do that?
No.
Okay. I think we want some conversation before we go there. Thank you though for that question. I did want to ask, there was a question that was asked about whether or not people could continue to submit maps. I think the answer to that is yes,
100%.
right?
Yep.
Okay, so, and there's another deadline now before our next meeting, right? March.
I don't like using the word deadline as much, but yeah, if they want their map to be considered at the next hearing, then they would want to submit that before 7 days before the next hearing. So we literally will make sure, we'll check it at 11:59.
Okay.
People can submit maps up through the entire process. It's just a question of whether or not they're submitting at a time that's really strategic to make sure that map gets a full conversation at the council. We're never going to like turn off the mapping in the process.
Right. But there's we're going along the process. So the later you are in,
There's
the less likely.
practical
Yeah.
points in.
Yeah. Okay, great. So do I have anybody who wants to start us off?
I will.
Thank you. Councilmember Edwards.
Yeah, I was under the impression that we had this first date was the time to get the map. So that's where I drew all of my information. And I know that myself and my fellow council members, I spent about 19 hours of this over this weekend. So it really wasn't a holiday weekend. Going so far as to take a look at each map, put the total Hispanic population, the voting population, whether they had the number of districts, whether it was complete, whether it was contiguous, and whether the percentages were correct through that. So I put a lot of time and effort and thought into this. I looked at the 48% of the maps submitted were for 5 districts, 35% were for 4 districts, and 15% for 6 districts. When we get to the emails that came in, I did this up until about 4 o'clock today. The at-large came in at 7, rotating at 10. No preference or ranked choice were 2. So I really took what I received at this time, thinking as the public was, is this is what we were doing, putting this together for tonight. So this is where I put my time. I didn't just come to a clear, quick decision. I actually looked at all of the things in your heat map. Boy, that would have saved me a lot of hours on going through that family thing of trying to figure out. And I felt I had a little advantage because I just walked the whole city just 3 months ago. So it was really clear in my mind of, okay, I know where the really hilly spots are. I know where the flats are, and just meeting and talking to the people in the houses of where that was. So I had a lot of information that I put into this in going through that. The other, our correspondents at the top seemed to be, one of them said interesting is that, like you did, is start at the top of the city and work your way down. And I think that a number of the maps did that. And it seems like that matches the heat map also, as far as a lot of the 5 districts submitted really matched your heat map of areas of income, interest, rentals, was very detailed. As I said, I had a lot of conversations because this, from the very beginning, I took what we were being sued for and what the prospect of this was. And it was about minorities having the ability to run. And that really, I had a great conversation with somebody today, and we were talking about it, and it came down to minorities are really just starting to get to the point in America where they're starting to build wealth, building businesses and doing that. So it's a harder process of going out and asking for money. And if we are going with a at-large mayor, that requires, then we're going back to requiring that $10,000 to $20,000 to run and having the ability to get that. So it was very clear to me when I reached out to members of minority organizations throughout the county and in the city. And one of the very interesting things we got was from the Sonoma County Latino Democratic Club. It says, under at-large elections, the votes of minority communities are frequently overshadowed by majority voting blocks, which often results in city councils that fail to reflect the diversity of the community. Legal precedents under the California Voting Act, such as Sanchez versus City of Modesto, clearly illustrate how at-large election systems can disenfranchise minority groups. When cities like Santa Rosa transitioned to district elections, the results were striking. Diverse representation improved with council members from varying ethnic, socioeconomic, and geographical backgrounds take shape. And I asked this question over and over again, is that while we're going through this, we are saying that at-large city is not fair, yet we are going to have a second tier for candidates if we have an at-large mayor. And I have not gotten a good explanation of why that is equitable, how that follows with our DEI principles, which are being under attack right now. And I think that that's very important that we understand all of that time we went through with the Enquintos, reaching out and understanding our communities. If we're trying to give people an opportunity to serve and have them step up to say, well, you can be a council member, but you'll never make it to mayor, or you'll have to do these other things. So I think it's very important that we keep that in mind. And so with that, one of the things that I was hearing from other elected officials and things was, well, how do you keep everybody still concerned? Because I think the main thing that I know as a council member is that I look at the whole city. I don't want to just look at my little neighborhood. I listen to everybody. I'm available to everybody, but I think I was really liked what I found that the city of Napa did. And when they transitioned to districts, they came up with a resolution that all council members will think of the city, that they will represent the city at large as opposed to just your neighborhood. And they had some really great language that said each member of the city council will help all members of the community, regardless of the district in which a resident resides or a proposed project is located from which a council member is elected. And I think that that's great, that we need to keep that in mind as we go forward.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. So I just wanted to give some feedback on the maps, if that's okay. So in the redistricting partners options that they created for us, in looking at draft C, I wanted to talk specifically about the area around March Avenue. And March Avenue, besides having some major potholes and some issues that we hear a lot about with respect to road repaving, if you're able to pull up this map C, that would be helpful. And specifically looking at district, what number are we? District 1. So I think, in reflecting on what Councilmember Edwards just said and how I believe that he mentioned this, that the heat maps, and when I say heat maps, I'm talking about the slide that Paul Mitchell shared earlier that shows both the renters versus homeowner data as well as income disparity data in the city. So if you are to look at District 1 and the area along the southern portion of that, I do think, in what Councilmember Hagley, mentioned earlier about how much new housing has been created and will be created in the northern end of the city, whether it's Enzo Village residents, the Burbank housing apartment residents that are those apartments being built now, the condos that are being built in North Village, the affordable housing at Saggio Hills, over 100 units of housing. There certainly is quite a bit of new population that is going to be joining our community or has already joined our community on the north end of town. And so as we are looking to distribute the populations as evenly as possible, but based on census data or American Community Survey data that exists that we have now, we know that this district has more people living in it and will have future more people living in it in the homes that are currently under construction than many other areas of the city. Yes, we know Mill District is another large development that's happening in town, but much smaller quantity of individuals that are going to be living there because of the unit count. So just that to be said, as we're looking at distributing population and trying to keep it even, I would suggest that we have some a little bit of flexibility, right? We have that standard deviation that Paul Mitchell had talked about, that it doesn't, every population number doesn't have to be exactly the same. And if we do need to shift numbers to make districts work, that we could underestimate a little on this northernmost district, because we know in fact, in 5 years, when we get a new census count, this district is going to have many more people than the last census count. I'm just extrapolating based on what we know of new housing. That said, the southern boundary of this district, I do think that there is some interesting room for conversation here along March Avenue. Specifically, right, we have on the right-hand side, Fitch Mountain Villas that's cut in half. There's some homes in Fitch Mountain Villas that are where the word March actually is. There are homes that are in Fitch Mountain Villas that are, to the east of University, and that face March Avenue that, would be in a separate district than the people directly across the street from them, but they are all in the same HOA. So I think that might be something to discuss. And hopefully, in my opinion, put the folks who all live in Fitch Mountain Villas in the same district as opposed to what's depicted on this map. The thing I like about this map that is different than a couple of the others is that all of the March Avenue residents from University West to Healdsburg Avenue, they're all in the same district. There is another map that was created that has the north end of March Avenue in one district and the south side of March Avenue in a different district, or parts of it. And I think that that doesn't make a ton of sense considering kind of the common, a lot of them are renters, a lot of them are apartments, a lot of them were built at the same time, and the commonality around some of the challenges that neighborhood may face. So I would like to see the properties that face March Avenue on the south side and the properties that face March Avenue on the north side, like is depicted in this map, to be in the same district. And then I wanted to reflect on what Mark McMullen had said. Sorry, I think it was Mark. Oh, no, Jonathan Perlman, sorry, about the homes at the north end of, the easternmost part of March Avenue, which is up the hill on Highland Circle. And that it's an interesting idea. I don't know population-wise if it's possible, given that Highland Circle is actually in a different census tract than the rest of the Fitch Mountain Villas area. So that's why it has that little, if you go back out to the full map of draft C, that's why that little tail exists at the top of District 4. And that is Highland Circle. And the folks who live on Highland Circle and the top of March Avenue, and I know there's other streets up there besides Highland Circle, they use March Avenue, and that area is kind of not necessarily that related to Powell. And so I am curious if there's a scenario in which we put Fitch Mountain Villas and the Highland Circle area all into the same district, so that we don't kind of cut off the folks at the top of March Avenue on Highland Circle in that area. Just some general feedback on that. And then with the other map that was created by Redistricting Partners, I'm gonna switch over to map. Sorry, I'm on two screens here. I think looking at the area, draft A, sorry. Oh, sorry, it's restarting. That there are some areas south of the river, by the river. And this map, to me, if you go to the southernmost section, there's a lot of different ways the southern section is cut. And for Mr. Mitchell, just so you know, we have a North Fitch Mountain Road that's in the county and a South Fitch Mountain Road that's in the city limits. So when talking about what Matheson turns into, we call it South Fitch Mountain Road. So I think the way that this district is cut for District 5, to me, compared to how draft C is cut, whereas like these, you can switch to it just to kind of show the two different ones. I think you have it in another tab that's open. Keeping the folks who face the river, both sides of it, in the same district, to me, it would be a priority. This district shows how they're not in the same. So for example, this one, which I think is draft C, has the Rivers Bend senior communities, the area, the bird courts, and the area in and around kind of the end of Tucker in a different district than the folks that are on the other side of the river, or the folks in kind of the Kennedy area. And so this one that's now showing District 5 and all of those folks in the same district, I'd be curious to hear from folks who live in this area and what their thoughts are, obviously. But to me, especially with respect to the South Entry area, with SCI-R, with what's going to be happening with station planning for the future smart station, to me, not cutting those interests into two different groups, but keeping them together is something I think we should consider. And I think the District draft C's map, which is a different one, when you're looking at this area, the purple that kind of tucks down, I think that's Front Street. There, that is like the area that goes down along Front Street. To me, that seems odd to have that be where these lines are cut, considering how those folks along Front Street, I think would seemingly make sense to stick within the other green district. So I don't like the idea of cutting those folks out, even though that's kind of where the River Bell Inn is. Like, those folks are differently situated than, say, people over on the other side of the railroad tracks necessarily. But that just, to me, was an area that seemed odd to be carving those small number of households out, especially because it includes the RV park that's there. And I think those folks have a lot in common with the RV park that's on Healdsburg Avenue, the mobile home park, I should say, and also the mobile home park on Kennedy Lane, that putting them in a separate district seemed odd to me. And then the only other thing I wanted to mention about where communities of interest and where these maps kind of didn't make sense to me was, if you look on this same map but go up to Healdsburg Avenue, I think Councilmember Hagley brought this up earlier, that this specific map has a couple cuts where each side of Healdsburg Avenue is in a different district. So, for example, where March and Dry Creek Road intersect Healdsburg Avenue, where Big John's is, you've got that as a point where one side, the east side, is in a different district than the west side. And then same thing if you go further south, the area in and around the fire station, where Grant Street and West Grant come to Healdsburg Avenue, those are in two different districts. And to me, it feels like the folks along Healdsburg Avenue, both on the east and west side of Healdsburg Avenue, have a lot in common, have a lot of challenges in common. I think about the folks that live along Larkspur on the west side of the fire station, that was like the planned development of homes that are pretty close together, that those folks have a lot in common with, say, the condo community that's directly across the street from the fire station. And they'll have kind of similar issues. And to me, having Healdsburg Avenue be the line that kind of bifurcates the districts, I'd like to see us, I don't have a problem with that section, but I would like us to either utilize the railroad track as the dividing line, because you don't have people who are kind of on both sides of that. I'd like to see the folks who live along Larkspur be in the district with the people to the east of them, because that is more of a neighborhood feel. And same thing with the folks who front Healdsburg Avenue in and around 7-Eleven, or even as you go further north, putting them in two separate districts feels odd to me. And then I just had some general comments around, I think, the level of engagement and the number of maps that people submitted was pretty spectacular. And I just wanted to applaud our community for their engagement on this. And even though this process is a little wonky and kind of in the weeds in terms of, cutting maps, and I think it was great to see so many different variations. And I think with the in the conversation about downtown and the conversation about negative externalities, I think that's a really interesting conversation for us to have. I also think one thing that sometimes comes into play is that if there's a council member who, quote unquote, has, owns an area, right, that's within their district, but if they have to recuse themselves on voting on it because of where they live, it might be nice to have, in this map that we're looking at right now, where the word Healdsburg reads, the D and the S of Healdsburg is the plaza. And so this map actually shows 1, 2, 3 districts that are all, in and around that plaza, and then another district that's pretty close by, the purple. And so I kind of lean towards having multiple council members have parts of the plaza in downtown, not parts of the plaza, but parts of the area surrounding the plaza in their district, because I think it shows kind of a shared benefit and a shared burden, especially as it relates to the negative externalities around downtown, and how, if, say, people are upset about parklets or parking or trash or whatever, that it's a shared responsibility for all of those council members who oversee that area, as opposed to one where it's like, it's not one person's fault if there's problems around the plaza. And I think having a coalition that can come together to solve it would be helpful, not hurtful. So those are my comments. Thank you.
If I could indulge one moment, I want to show something that I think is informative to the comments that were just made around the area around Front Street. I just want to show something that's interesting about your census geography. And something that's basically a little bit problematic about your census geography. When you're trying to draw districts where you say, well, I want to, let me just show this for you. And this is a great thing about having this online tool that everybody can use. If you were looking at this area around Front Street, and in the Plan C, as we know, in the Plan C, this area here on Front Street hooks down. But the issue is this. This is the shape of that census block. So that census block is 432 people, which your deviation, largest to smallest, is like 150-ish people. So this is a huge chunk of your, and if you were to say, well, I want to put these northern and southern sides of Fitch Mountain Road together, you would have to take in all of that area to do that. And you start to get a large part of a district. So, and if you were to say, well, I want to remove this one Front Street part, you're going to end up removing everything going all the way out to the end of South Fitch Road. Sorry, it's the eraser tool. So I just wanted to point that out, and I'm sorry for the.
Thank you. We can see the issue here.
Yeah.
So Vice Mayor Herod.
Thank you. I just, let me see, I want to start off by echoing, I think, a main starting point for me that came from what Councilmember Edwards said, and that's basically that the whole trajectory of this process is really rests on how well we can enhance equity and representation in our community. And so we can have questions about whether we needed to go down this road or not, but here we are, and I certainly think that is the best outcome we can make of it. And so that's been sort of a guiding principle of mine as I went through this process and as I worked with the Districtor tool, but also as I looked at other maps. And so I was mostly focused on 5 districts for some of the reasons that Councilmember Edwards said, but also some other ones that I've said in the past. I don't need to go over them, but I think that for me that having a so-called rotating mayor and 5 districts serves our equity goals best for a number of different reasons. And that being said, I did give a lot of time to the 4 district maps, and also in conversation with a lot of people who felt that was the right direction to go. And so as I came up with a sort of final group of 6 maps that are interesting to me, there was one that has 4 districts in it. So I just wanted to mention that I have that on the shelf. But I do want to focus on the map that I thought made the most sense, and there's some other ones like it, but and just kind of walk through my thinking about that one. And it's let me give you it's nicknamed 2025, and the actual number on it is 278352, if you're able to pull that up. But the thing about that one is, and I'm able to look at it on my screen here, but if you can pull that up, is that it has, I mean, I think it's inevitable when you start to look at even populations as a necessity, as a starting point, that in order to build a district that has a majority Latino representation, that you inevitably find that on the west side of town. And so there's a lot of different ways that people did that. You can see that this was not, I wasn't the only person with this same concern and the same effort, you know, when drawing out the maps. But you know, what does that Western District look like, and what does it do to the other districts when you start to draw it? And so one of the things about this map is it avoids what a lot of the maps did, which was to draw a very long, thin district that went up further into where we see District 5 in this case. So this one is actually, even though it is somewhat long and thin, it's actually more compact. But what it does, at least in this case, with whoever drew this map, the other districts, I think, portray a logical compactness and reasonable shaping in the way that it breaks up the town. And one of the main things that I see here also that I like, which reflects some of the concerns that Councilmember Kelly brought up, is that District 2 creates some cohesiveness along the river, and that is an area that is worth isolating, if you will. And I think what a lot of people experience is if they had some ideas about where communities were in our town or what neighborhoods had certain cohesiveness, that once you started working with population, you never got a clean result. You never really got to do all the communities that you wanted just right. And so I just had to prioritize my values in terms of building a district or creating a district that had a strong Latino population in it, and then take it from there and let the ball fall from that point forward. And so this is the one that I like the best. And so I'm just want to pull that out there. There's other ones that I have on my short list, and maybe we'll pull those up later as the conversation proceeds. But there you have it. That's what I came up with.
Mayor and council members, with the mayor's consent, I might want to see if I can force a little conversation. I think Vice Mayor Herod is correct. This addresses some, not everything, but some of the things we heard from Councilmember Kelly. So we as staff would be curious to hear if this is one of those maps that resonates with the group. But it would be helpful as we go through this conversation in this case, and presumably several more as we go forward, to get a feel from the group if this is one that you might like to see come back as one of those draft maps.
I looked at that one and I don't know if we could get around, but there was the 212 unaccounted for residents in that, and I don't know if we moved that around, if that would work. So that was the only question I had on that particular map.
From my perspective, I think the issues that were brought up with the South Entry and the Rivers Bend area and the being in its own district makes sense. I like the fact that the District 1 on this one, allows for that to be. So yeah, to me, this is a good start, I guess. Councilmember Higley, sorry.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm approaching this, I'm, looking to hear from everybody. I like some of the comments that Councilmember Kelly made about Fitch Mountain Villas. And, if you're going to take from a district and add to another, kind of, take it from whatever the North District is, if the numbers work out. I'm still, trying to work, my head around the long skinny piece. I did like how this is stacked. I did look at this map, but I did circle that long skinny piece and kind of want to think about that a little bit more. The other comment that I liked that Councilmember Kelly mentioned was the Healdsburg Avenue, both sides. I thought that was kind of an interesting, way to do it. And I think, she's right. You go to the tracks. Initially, I was like, well, should the tracks be a divider? Because we're not that big of a town, and the tracks, it's not like, it's miles and miles and miles and nowhere to cross. So Yep, I'm pretty flexible on that, but I do think it makes sense to have both sides of Healdsburg Avenue included in the same district. And I think the easiest way to do that would be from the tracks going east, but you know, that's just, I don't know if that would work with this particular map, but I'm open on some of those. I do agree that to this map specifically, I like the 3 different touches on downtown, but for this map, I think I do like the southern part of that District 1 to be part of District 2 and maybe bring District 2 down lower like we've seen in some other maps. So that's where I'm at right now, but I'm still listening.
If I can answer the question, if I just went and cleaned up this map on Districtor, the one issue is that District 2 and District 1 on this map, District 2 is underpopulated and District 1 is overpopulated, but is by the tiniest amount. And this little hook here, which is East Street, if that were to go into District 1, it would make this map populated after all the little missing pieces are filled in. So I can go ahead and save that as a new map in Districtor. And it will be 285161, and that'll be a modified version of this 278352, and that's on the website right now.
Great, thank you. I like doing this on the fly too. That's great. If I could just weigh in a little bit too, I appreciated all that what Councilmember Edwards was saying about the keeping this equitable and our DEI initiatives about the rotating mayor versus the mayor at large. I've been keeping an open mind, looking at all the different maps, the 4, the 6, the 5. And I have several here that I like that I could propose, but there are 5 districts. I really don't. Fundamentally, I just can't find myself agreeing with the idea of a elected mayor. I think it would fly in the face of what we're trying to do here. And I think it's something that we need to consider moving forward. I hope that we could kind of put it to rest. I mean, at some point we have to make this decision, and I know that people think that we're not listening to them. That's not true. We also have a number of people that I've spoken with, and including other electeds who've gone through district elections who have rotating mayors versus elected mayors and the issues associated with that. So I've really tried to dive into that issue and understand why it's good, why it's bad. The pros and cons of it, and mostly the feedback I've gotten is that the councils are cohesive. They work together. They like the rotating mayor. Everybody gets an opportunity to be in that role, and nobody's elevated amongst the other council members, which is the danger of that. And even people saying that, well, I want to be able to vote for the mayor and that person's going to really listen to, I think they're saying that person's going to listen to me versus my district elected council member. I think it's the opposite. I would think that your district elected council member is the one who you should go to a lot and talk to them and discuss your issues. So to make it work really well and equitably. So those are my comments about that. I haven't been able to come up with a reason to change that thinking, even though I've listened and tried to understand. But like I said, I've heard from so many different people, both just community members, friends, elected officials. Everyone I've talked to is pretty much coming down with a rotating mayor they think is the right choice for us too. So. I really like the map that Vice Mayor Herod suggested. I'm also really like the map C that the demographers came up with the modification of the South Entry area. I think that long skinny thing there, I think it's really important to have the South Entry and the I think you call it it's the Birdland and the Rivers Bend, that whole area who share. That's definitely a community of interest on the river there, and I think that's an important group to keep together, and it would eliminate a little bit of that long, skinny west district and make it a little more palatable, I think. So I think kind of a combo of A and C was that. I think that's what Councilmember Kelly was kind of pointing out. I think A has that tail more appropriately done. And so does the map that Vice Mayor Herod suggested. So, I'd like to see us go in that direction. And I see Councilmember Kelly has her hand up.
Thank you. And I think, just to put the issue to bed, like, I think we've been talking about whether we have an at-large mayor versus rotating. And I think we've had really thoughtful, thorough deliberations about this. And, I certainly made my case clear as a dissenting voice in one of the prior hearings of kind of being the devil's advocate for the other side of being the lone voice who was advocating for an at-large mayor. But it doesn't mean that I don't completely agree with everything that is being said by my colleagues about the equity issues and the elevation and being collegial and having a rotation. And I concur with all of those things. And this is really just an opportunity to kind of deliberate on a system that has been in place for a long time versus we're in this moment where we're making sweeping changes to how we elect our city's leadership in the future. And I think that's a part of this process, is kind of weighing a variety of issues, the number of districts and, the size of the districts, et cetera. So I definitely, have heard very loud and clear from so many folks in the community, both sides of what they want in that, and, want to support moving forward with 5 districts and being able to say that we've really looked at a variety of these different avenues and to be able to move forward in harmony. So it's certainly not, a hill I want to die on. And also I agree that that there are pros and cons to both. And we've, in Sonoma County, we have 9 cities. We have 2 cities with a directly elected mayor. We have other cities that have different protocol than we have. Santa Rosa has a 2-year mayor, and who knows what Sonoma is going to do, because they're going through this process right now as well. So I think there's no right decision, right? It's we can evaluate pros and cons and then and move forward. But I do hear clearly that this is, something that the majority of my colleagues want to maintain 5 districts, and I totally support that. So with that, I did want to just mention, because I didn't hear from Vice Mayor, his comments, came subsequent to mine. So the map that he's referring to, and apologies, I don't have the number, but then Mr. Mitchell created a different one and posted it, so I'm able to see that one. I think that map is a really good one, and I'm grateful for the Vice Mayor for pulling it out of the laundry list that we were reviewing. And it solves some of the. It doesn't solve all the challenges that I identify, but it certainly solves some of them, specifically as it relates to the river community being one. Wait, this is a different map than the one I'm looking at.
That's C.
Okay, good. I was like, wait a second. That's the one. Great. So I think with this map, the southern end of the city, the south entry area being in the same district as the folks along the river, to me, and I want to just clarify my comments about certain roads bifurcating and what that means, because for South Fitch Mountain Road, which I'm trying to figure out how you can see here. There you go. I'm actually okay, and I, open to being wrong here, but the folks who are in the green section are definitely up the hill, right? They have higher fire danger, they have larger parcels, they are larger single family homes. They're not these planned communities like what is south of South Fitch Mountain Road, closer to the river. So to me, I don't actually see this particular artery of Matheson Street turning into South Fitch Mountain as being a problem as the line that bifurcates those 2 districts. So and Matheson is all one, per Jonathan Perlman's comments, where he was like, in some of these maps, Matheson cuts 2 separate districts, and here Matheson is all one district, which is that historic area there, which I think is nice to see all in one. I think in some of the conversations we've had tonight, I'm not totally sure where we land around the plaza and if we want folks to have, but you can see the word Healdsburg on the left there. So the D and the S again are the plaza. If we wanted to have, change a couple of those blocks and move the yellow peach district closer to the plaza and keep some downtown in both of those districts, I'd be open to that. I don't think there's so many voters that live in and around the plaza because it's a majority a commercial district. So I don't think we're going to have, I don't know what we can do about that given the fact of the census tracts and what that actually means for the area around the plaza, but I'm open to maybe tinkering with that at a future meeting to see if there's options there. And then also with this map, the thing that it does further north, closer to Benjamin Way and Sunset Drive and those areas, if you scroll up, it does put the neighborhoods that we were talking about previously into one district. So it doesn't have the Highland Circle problem because all of March Avenue and Highland Circle are now in one district. So if you go to the right from there, they're all together. So those folks aren't on an island anymore. There is, and then the folks in and around Powell, they've been kind of brought back together as well, further south. So some of those challenges I think have been solved. March Avenue's all together as well, but it does still bifurcate along Healdsburg Avenue. So I'd be interested to see if there's a way to bring the Healdsburg Avenue east and west sides into the same district. But I'm not, if we can't do it, we can't do it. And then this district also for the district on the west side, Grove Street area, I think, having a very long district there, to me, it's like when you look at the census information and what we've done historically to identify that as a community of concern and a lower income census tract, it doesn't bother me that one long district is still what we're talking about there. I mean, as you saw in the majority of the maps that were submitted, that is a predominantly heavily Latino neighborhood, a lot of apartments, a lot of renters, a lot of low income residents as well. There's also the senior living community over there, and then the area in and around the post office with condos and a lot of renters. So I think it's, that to me, even though it's a long district compared to the others, because of the way the railroad tracks cut it, I think it makes sense. So and the area around Big John's Market, I think that would be one we'd probably want to just kind of look at how 3 districts come together right at that point of March Avenue and Healdsburg Avenue there. And if that's challenging at all, I don't know yet, because this is like a new map to really be thinking about, but I like, conceptually, I like this map, and I think it's a good one to consider tinkering with as we go forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Hagley.
Can you zoom in on this map around the SMART station? I just want to take a look at that area.
Can you?
The lower part of the blue district. And then scooch it down a little bit. Other way, sorry. Just scooch it up. Okay, Tucker. Okay.
So in playing around with it, it is possible to just show you how this works. This is a little live line drawing here. If we were to go and add all these, to the blue district. So both sides of Healdsburg is now in the same district. It does create a slight deviation problem for us, where that deviation, we probably need to figure out a way to add something to the green district, to the central district here, in order to kind of balance. Might want to do something like what was being suggested around here around the plaza. Something like that. But then we would have to do something to probably, and I'm going to arbitrarily grab a census block. Now it's within 10%. So it is something like that is a modification where now we've made Healdsburg all in the Western District. Healdsburg Avenue, we've done a little bit of this plaza area down here. If we look at the evaluation of this district, this is where you can actually get in and look at the citizen voting age population. And that district number 1 is at 29.7. Before we did that unification of Healdsburg, that district 1 was around 31% citizen voting age population Latino. So this is below 30, which might be something that you want to consider if there's a 31, 32, 33% Latino district that might be perceived as being more of an influence district in line with the California Voting Rights Act. But again, these are all trade-offs, and this is an estimated number as well. So there are things that you could do with this map that was discussed to create a kind of modified version to address these small issues. But we are talking about very small population deviation kind of adjustments. And I'm not going to save this. I just wanted to show that as an example.
Can you, let me see the top of that blue district.
Chiquita side up there?
Yeah.
It goes all the way up.
Yeah, so that's a lot of the commercial district too, right? Yeah, it's all the commercial. And then goes down and includes the middle district and downtown. And the population is, okay, so where's, okay.
This maximum population deviation means
That's pretty good.
well, that is the largest or smallest deviation from the median. So it really means that we're under 10% because
Yeah, I saw some in here 0.06 or 1.9, which is somebody did a really good job.
yeah, you can do that sometimes.
Okay.
Okay, so where are we? We've got one map that we all like, apparently. Do we have two?
If you wanted to
The map
elevate,
C.
if you wanted to elevate this map I've drawn, it's here on the website for the public. You could consider this 285161. We could make that map D. And then at the next hearing, it could be one that you're considering.
Let's do that. Is that,
You
yeah,
don't have to vote, just consensus.
we
That's
all
great.
agree?
Yeah, I heard a lot of enthusiasm for that one, so I'm sure we'd be happy to refine that and get that back to you so you can kind of.
And then we can do
dig in.
those kind of adjustments like we looked at just now too.
And I think we also talked about map C as well with some adjustments.
If you wanted, we could actually look at some adjustments to map C right now. I believe this is map C. Let me look real quick again. If we go here on the website, we have stored a map C here. Let me just close these others so I don't get confused.
Councilmember Kelly, did you have a comment at this point?
I just had a quick question about 285161. There is a piece of it in the, what is the neighborhood called? Kennedy Lane, Presidential Circle, that I just wanted to zoom in on because I can't quite tell what's going on. It's at the very bottom, the southernmost section of the blue district. I don't know what numbers these are, but that. Are there homes south of the word Kennedy Lane? I can't
Like in this
tell.
census block right there?
Below the word Kennedy Lane, down there.
Okay, let me see if that could go blue and what happens if we
Because
do that.
that would be a very odd decision to not include those homes in blue because.
That actually improves the deviation a tiny
Okay.
bit to do that.
Great. And then is there another, what is the yellow that's just to the south of it between that and the freeway? Yeah, there. Is that another?
So there's two, actually. There's one,
Yeah.
let me go to where it's drawing only one. It's,
Yeah, so if you see the shading on the right side there.
see that
where-
right
Yeah.
there? See how it goes all the way down?
Yeah.
And that has, let me see, but
Are there homes in that section?
I'm gonna,
Very
I'm gonna be able to
interesting.
check here.
Then-
I think that sliver is just.
Oh. Yeah,
But
it's a
Well, but
right-of-way.
is that, I think the bottom loop is presidential circle, right?
Yes.
And so that would imply that there are houses on the outside of that circle.
Right. So I would imagine that the yellow section there,
Right there,
That
yeah.
does have population.
that should be included in blue because you have people, there's a river there that you can barely, yes. So that shading is the river. And I think even though there's a little bit to the right, the east side of the river there, I think you'd want to include that in blue, which means we now need to take away population elsewhere in blue. But
No, it's actually okay still.
Oh, it is? Okay,
It's
great.
okay, but what we can't, this might lock us out of being able to do that Unify Healdsburg thing further up. So
I'm
if
sorry,
we
what
did
does
this,
Unified Healdsburg further up mean?
so if as an example,
Healdsburg
you said, I
Avenue.
want to do that, but now Paul, can you go back and put these census blocks here into the blue because I want to have both sides of Healdsburg be in the same district, I probably couldn't do that now.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think you could lose the area around the plaza or the area, you know, under the word Healdsburg to the west side. I think there's some population closer to downtown that it would certainly make sense to put in the Orange Peach
Well,
district.
Could I ask a quick question? Because Councilmember Edwards, it doesn't sound like, I've kind of heard you kind of grunting over here, but so you don't feel that Healdsburg Avenue should be.
No, it's just that when you look at the deviations, when you leave population out, it gets very difficult. Like he says, you can't break up a census block. So when you add somewhere, it's not like it's just, you get to draw the section you want to add. You have to go at the whole block.
No,
So
I get that, but I mean, we're looking at this right now and
just playing with district or myself, I don't see how you can get the Kennedy Lane, that section, and both sides of Healdsburg Avenue in one.
Yeah, we haven't, here Healdsburg is, both sides of Healdsburg are in different districts. And so it's balanced. If I were to put these districts, these census blocks into the blue district, then we'd probably have to start doing, like was mentioned by Councilmember Kelly, bringing more of this yellow into Plaza without growing yellow too large, taking some of the yellow population out here from the green. So
So I think there's two things that I wanted clarity on. So you're looking strictly at the statistics. I'm looking at it as it does make sense that both sides of Healdsburg Avenue should be in one. Now, whether we can or not, you know, I mean, if they happen to be, you got to draw a line somewhere. Okay. But that's what I'm trying to, forget about the numbers right now, but just conceptually, like Healdsburg Avenue, that section, you know, from the tracks to maybe included over here, or like how would you look at that?
I'm not as concerned on this one at the 28% because looking at what is in that 28%, we have a lot of apartments. We have, because you've got the apartments at the north end, you've got, I think Ward Street is in here too. That's what we end up with. Yeah, Ward Street is in the blue. So it keeps it, I could go away from the 30% and go 28% on this district. It's just getting the tracks along Healdsburg Avenue. So I think this one works. 29, yeah.
Well, I guess my question is more related to the community of interest, and it goes back to the discussions during Measure O, where we had a housing overlay district for that section that ran up Healdsburg Avenue, and some of the residents that were on the west side of Healdsburg Avenue were part of what could potentially be impacted. But then the people right across the street are now looking across the street. So there's that consideration. So that's kind of where my mind was going in terms of more of a community of interest thing, like by splitting it, you know, it's just a question that I had as I was looking at this where, okay, Healdsburg Avenue seems like a good, perfect split, but that's some of the feedback I heard 3 months ago when we were out campaigning from people. Yeah. The tracks, which could then be, you know, include the west side in with the east side of Healdsburg Avenue.
I'm not going to die on point.
Yeah, let me just say you're both doing it right. Because when you're doing it absolutely right. When I give my presentation, one of the analogies I often use, I don't know if treat race like your speedometer when you're driving. If you stare only at the speedometer, you're going to crash into something. But if you drive and never look at your speedometer, you're going to speed constantly. So you need to be cognizant of both. And that's exactly what both of you have been doing. Let's be cognizant of this citizen voting age population number, because that's what's being raised in the legal concerns. Let's be cognizant of the communities of interest and how those balance, and doing it exactly right.
So let me ask this with the input that we've been giving about this particular map. Are you able to kind of work with it and see if you can make it balance?
It's balanced right now.
Okay.
The question is, do you want me to save this as it looks right this moment as Plan D to bring back? Or do you want to try to unify Healdsburg Avenue and do the adjustments necessary to do that and make that Plan D? Do you want to consider that unification to Healdsburg now or later?
I'm not married to it.
We could do it
Down to
later.
that detail.
Yeah.
I think it's something out for comment to come back, and that might help guide us on what we do with that specific area.
Yeah, so we've got a really good 89 to 90% map that we like with a couple of tweaks, but for next time, right? Because we were talking about the next meeting having 2 or 3 maps to look at. Is that where we're hoping to get here?
This would be the 4th, and then you could remove 1 or 2 of A, B, C, or D. And of course, any of those other public maps you could bring up as well at the next hearing. But having these ones elevated to being a draft map helps the public really know these are the ones you're most seriously considering. So if everybody's good, I'm going to save this as Plan D.
I think we're all good. Yes? Zoom people? Okay.
So there will be a PDF version of this that'll be constructed after this hearing as well and posted on the city website.
So one thing I did want to say is like when I was reaching out to people that had emailed me on this, one of the things that I wanted to hear from people is, you know, which district are you in, and give me the feedback on these lines, because, you know, we're all very familiar with our neighborhoods and we have our regular path of travel. So it's kind of, I want to kind of hear that feedback, like, okay, this, like that long skinny area, if you're on the south part, does that really relate? You know, so that's kind of the feedback that would be helpful for me. The other thing is draft A is still in there as well as one of the draft maps. Because I do like how District 5 is set up. Yeah, is that draft A?
This is A, yes.
Yeah, just especially on the south side. So that's just, I would love to elevate that one too, just so that we can have some discussion about this big, long, skinny section, or how this is. I'd like to hear a little bit more feedback on that.
And I cut off, I think, when we were discussing earlier, did we want to do an amendment to C? To make us C2?
From my perspective, yes, I would like to see, I liked most of C except the south entry, or the southern part of it, that long tail, where map A addresses that, I think, in a better fashion. Can you mix the two?
The one thing I can do, and I've played with this already to see based on the comment, is what I understood. I can put this into the green district and there's no population there. That's one simple thing.
That's the Sire property? Okay.
And I'm not sure, I think this is a suggestion, correct me if I'm wrong, but Paul, that what we call the south entry area would actually go further south, staying east of the river, but going further on south. And likewise there, I think you'll find very little population.
Okay, let me look. So I've got like 3 screens, and so if I bring this district down here like this, we're still within deviation if we do that. I could try a little bit more.
And that's keeping, is that keeping the, so we, south of the south, is it keeping the Rivers Bend area, all of that together?
Yeah.
That's the goal here, right?
Now the question is, we can take, let's look at the number there, 2349. No population there. There is population there. And that deviation, see how that deviation went to 9.15? That means our total planned deviation
actually
around 18%.
Yeah, you need to go back on to the left there. Keep going. That one needs to be part of there you go.
So that is possible. Do a little bit of other cleanup. There's a real tiny census block over here.
Can you just remind me again how those like weird census blocks come up? I don't remember it from the first meeting.
So the census blocks are drawn by the U.S. Census Bureau. They do take input from the counties in every 10-year process, that they ask counties to send them their geographic boundaries of their cities and school districts and any other geographic areas. In counties that are really aggressive about it, we have better matches to like neighborhoods and city boundaries to census geographies. In others, in California, it's really kind of generally kind of does a poorer job. There's literally a census block in Oakland that the census says is in San Francisco. So there's issues all over the state with census block alignment, and census blocks are drawn in weird ways because the census is just trying to draw areas that they can go and send canvassers to go walk and collect surveys.
Okay.
Councilmember Kelly, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I just had a question about map C for the feedback. So map C, again, was the one that
This
has
is map C.
March Avenue cutting through half of Fitch Mountain Villas is in one district, and the, not half, sorry. The ones south of March Avenue are in one district and another. And then it also has Highland Circle in a different district than the folks in Fitch Mountain Villas. And I'm just curious if there's thoughts from my colleagues about trying to unify Fitch Mountain Villas and or Highland Circle into the same districts. Or you guys are okay with having
No, I think it makes sense to be in that green.
leaving it as is or changing it to unify Fitch Mountain Villas?
I think you unify Fitch Mountain Villas.
So let's
You,
look
you
real
say the
quick.
green, which is to the left, our left,
Yeah, like you're talking about that section, bringing it
kind
down
of
there.
turquoise green.
When we're talking about that, we're also Oak Knoll Drive is still on the Highland Circle loop. So it's broken up. You've put the people on Oak Knolls, which are still up on that ridge. You've still separated that community up there.
Right.
I don't know
to
how
me,
you can.
This is an area that needs to be fixed. If we bring C back,
Yeah.
we have to
Yeah,
fix this and C.
agreed.
You do have some funky census block shapes.
We didn't do that.
Of course we do.
So I'm gonna, just so that we get the number, 2167 is the yellow district number. When I add it, that's 2332, so that means that there's over 150 people there. So that is a weird, I know, I just made yellow just to get the count. But if we were to like put it into this green colored district, real quickly, these would be way out of whack in terms of deviation.
I remember struggling with this one. It is a weird area.
You could bring the southern part of the green district up.
You're right.
Southern part of this district up?
The green district?
This line,
Yeah,
green
bring the
district.
Bottom part of that district.
Oh, so you could do a rotation. You almost end up probably drawing at least 3 of the districts where you could grab these into the green. Let's remember these moves because I'm gonna have to undo them. And then now we just did all this stuff to put the yellow. We could undo that. And then we'd have to come back here and make this stuff over here blue. It'd be like a full rotation around the city to just deal with those populations of those 2 cents. It might be one of those things that we find a creative solution to, and maybe even a map that's a different version of a map, like, A or B. But
Does that qualify as compact?
so that's an issue. It's
less
from a general, we discussed earlier that it isn't necessarily travel contiguity. Is it compact in the terms of the state law? It's getting far away population bypassing other nearby population? Yes, but in order to meet a higher goal of population equality. We can't find another way to draw this and create equal population. So the compactness is actually a much lower rank criteria. So that is, you're right, technically not a very compact shape using the California definition, but at the same time, it's being done for the highest ranking criteria, which is equality population. So if we were to stop here, this would be C2. Because we did these changes here. That
But
we're
Highland
almost,
Circle is still separated from March Avenue.
yeah, we haven't addressed anything in the northern
Oh, got
part
it. Okay.
of the map. All we've done is address this stuff in the southern part of the map. And so if we were to stop here, we could save this and say, okay, we have a C2 that addresses these cleanup kind of things.
I would say to do that. And then we can continue to try to figure out the other piece. Highland Circle is definitely part of really the neighborhood of Fitch Mountain Villas. I know.
Map D is looking good.
So would the public then be able to take these maps if we're, you know, A, B, C, D, 2, 3, whatever, and then they can modify them and save them as their own and submit them?
Yeah, what I've been doing here, they could just mirror, which is if
Okay.
you open the Districtor tool, you'll see in the heading, it has its original number. But when I go ahead and hit save, it will assign a new number.
Okay.
Before I say this, I want to make sure.
And so if we're going to move, it looks like two or three maps forward for the next meeting, and then people want to make some modifications to that, they would just come and look, they would be as new maps for us to look at?
They'd have a 5-digit number.
Okay.
Somebody could, in the subject line or email the city and say, a modified map C and it's called this, and that's what I want you to consider at the next meeting or something like that.
Okay.
We right now, if we went out right now and froze, we would save this as C2. We would then on the website have A, B, C, C2, D, and those would be the maps that would be the draft maps. You haven't excluded one entirely, but they're all there. And then you'd still have that long row of now 79 publicly drawn maps.
Okay. City manager, is that where we want to get to?
Yeah, I think we've gotten lots of progress. So yes, before we consider abruptly cutting anything off, though, I think you could, right? I don't have anywhere to be. If there were other maps that anybody's seen, these
right
mouse traps here. So if there are other maps that people have seen that really kind of take a meaningfully different approach, I think we can absolutely take a look at those too and kick around the pros and cons.
Can we see the ones that we have saved so far?
I had a couple more, but I'm happy with where we're at.
Okay.
I'm just going to save this as C2.
Councilmember Kelly has her hand up too. Go ahead.
Thank you. I think this is really helpful, and I know that no one knows neighborhoods best besides a lot of the folks who live or work in them. So I think having these available, as Mr. Mitchell just said, and letting people tinker with them and move the lines around, I think is great. I'm a little bit nervous about how the instructions to educate the community about how to use Districtor to do what he just suggested people do. So I don't know if it's possible for us to have a tutorial just about posted or a video or something, because I know we've had other videos posted about how to use Districtor, but that I think between now and the next public hearing, getting the community to weigh in on these 4 maps and telling us what's good and what's not about them would be helpful. Just because there's just things we won't know because we don't live in those, those areas, that to be able to figure out how to use Districtor to do what he just did. If we could have a tutorial posted about that, or a video or something, public outreach from the city, just to try to get more feedback would be great. But I like where we're at. Thank you.
Is that possible to do?
Texting staff right now.
Okay.
I
Thank
would
you.
like to add one that was important to me. 277488.
Let me bring it up while I, I'm just scrolling through them to get that one up.
It's where the spreadsheet's nice with hyperlinks.
Yeah. I have to go through 277.
488.
Okay.
Does add a lot to District 1, but. Because that keeps Highland Circle and Oak Knolls, Marsh Avenue all in one. But it does have the problem with Healdsburg Avenue, I think.
Yeah, so this actually does a very similar plan in these central districts. It has the same, yeah.
So can you tell us why you like this map?
Because it does that Highland Circles, it's got the balance of the population. Although it does,
We're just kind of,
How is this one different than the one we just looked at? Maybe Ms. Councilmember Edwards could tell us, like, what do you feel like is different about this than the one Vice Mayor brought forward?
it's just another one, you know, it's close. It keeps that Highland Circle area, Oak Knolls all together, but it does still have that Healdsburg Avenue issue to fix on that.
so to be clear, the northernmost district is almost identical except for this one census block right here.
Mm-hmm.
The two central districts are identical? Identical. This one we just created as D comes down all the way. And on this one, it doesn't include that. But of course, we looked and there wasn't that much population there. Very similar.
We're just on my notes.
Can I ask a question about this one?
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Not Mayor, I'm asking you. Sorry.
Go ahead. We both have
the
Mitchell name.
The section under the word Chiquita, that's the difference. It's that census block. Yes, right there. Can you zoom in on that one? I'm trying to figure out what that is. Okay, so it's the west side of Healdsburg Avenue where the community center is and the Chevrolet dealership. Okay. Got
There's
it.
Big John's Market there. There's a Chevrolet dealership.
Okay, great. Thank you. So that one of the maps, the one that Chris or Vice Mayor brought forward, that section is
In the blue. So it's
Okay.
unifying Healdsburg there into the blue district. And there's no population.
Got it. Okay, so it doesn't change the numbers either way. It's just a question of where we think it fits in.
Mm-hmm.
So we are, what, we've got 5 that we're looking at here to move forward?
Mm-hmm.
Can
Okay.
you show us again which ones? I like draft
Yeah.
A. I want to make sure.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and share my screen again. And this will be good for the public if they're watching too to kind of understand this. On the website where we have the transition to district elections, there currently is all these maps of the district or maps where the number is the actual PDF and the URL is the web-based map you can search. Then we have draft maps A, B, and C. And so we will tomorrow morning create a C2 and a D. We'll create the PDF map and the web-based map, and they'll go under here on the city website. And then we will also provide, what we'll do is we'll do a, I'm trying to think the best way to do this. When you go in to submit a map, and you want to draw and submit your own map, we came in here and put in here the draft map A, B, and C. And then while we were here, I drew D and C2. These maps, any member of the public can come in and say, hey, I really liked draft map D. I want to click on that. But I really do want to do that thing about putting the Chevy dealership into, back into the blue district. And they can make that one change and they could hit save and it would save it with a new number. We'll do a quick 2-minute video that shows that.
That'd be great. Yeah. Okay. So do we have any other comments, questions, concerns that we want to address tonight, or are we ready to move on? Move on? Yeah, okay. Zoom people move on.
Move on. I think very great collaboration tonight.
Agreed.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, Paul. Appreciate that. All right, so now we go backwards, right, to city manager reports.
Mayor, I'll forego the update. I think we've got a couple folks, but nothing pressing for me. So given the hour, I'll save it for next time.
Okay, it'll be extra long next meeting.
That's correct.
Perfect. So, whoops.
About the bus.
About the bus, yeah. So we move on to public comments on items on the consent calendar and non-agenda items. If there's, this time is set aside for comments to receive comments from the public regarding matters of general interest, not on the agenda, but related to city council business. Pursuant to the Brown Act, however, the city council cannot consider any issues or take action on any requests during this comment period. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment? No, I'm not seeing anyone. Okay. So we'll move on to the consent calendar. Do I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
Second?
So could we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Okay, and so public hearings we've done. Old business, fiscal year 2024-25 mid-year budget review, Finance Director Katie Edgar. Thank you for hanging in with us.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Katie Edgar, Finance Director here to present to you the mid-year financial update for fiscal year 2024-2025. Next slide, please. The proposed action tonight is to receive a presentation on the mid-year financial update and adopt a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year 24-25 budget. A full list of the proposed amendments are included in the agenda packet. To summarize tonight's report, sales tax revenue is slowing down, while TOT revenues remain on target to hit budget expectations. Water revenues continue to trend high because of increased consumption, but overall expenses are generally tracking as budgeted. Next slide, please. Starting with the general fund revenues, through the first half of the year ending December 31st, 2024, the city received $9.5 million or 50% of the adopted $18.8 million budget. The first disbursement of property tax was received in December, and revenues totaled $2.1 million or 67% of the adopted budget. Property tax revenues for the first half of the year are slightly higher than the budget projections, but the timing of disbursements can vary year to year, so staff are watching closely for the April disbursement. Property transfer tax received through December totals $110,000, 55% of the adopted budget. The total number of property transfers has increased from the previous year by 53%, with the sale of the Mill District properties representing about 45% of that overall increase in transaction volume. Vehicle license fee swap revenue is dispersed in 2 equal tranches, and the first disbursement exceeded revenue projections by 1%. So staff are proposing a small increase to the revenue budget to create alignment. Sales tax revenue received through December totaled $3.2 million or 38% of the adopted budget. Notably, this excludes the December disbursement of sales tax revenue that will be received later this month. However, the increased federal funds rate has caused softening in 3 of the city's major business sectors, as well as the county and state pools. As a result, staff proposed reducing the adopted sales tax revenue budget by about $214,000 to align with the current projections, which represent about a 3.4% reduction from the prior year revenues. While the city, completely lost my place. While the city received only 38% of the budgeted franchise fees revenue through the first half of the year, the second quarterly disbursement from Comcast and the annual disbursement from PG&E are not reflected in these figures. Therefore, revenues received appear to be trending in alignment with the adopted budget. Transient occupancy tax received in the general fund totaled $774,000 or 56% of the adopted budget. We'll delve into that a little more deeper on the community services side. Development fees and permits have collectively received 50% of the budgeted revenue, although planning fees lagged in the first half of the year due to a reduction in planning applications, as well as many of the large developments moving into the building phase. Building permit fees offset the planning fee reductions, keeping the overall revenue on trend. Intergovernmental revenue received for the first half of the year represents only 25% of the adopted budget due to the Coastal Conservancy grant being billed on a reimbursement basis. Staff expect work to continue with the reimbursements being received throughout the remainder of the year and are proposing an additional true-up amendment to capture the remaining available funding on that grant. Unrestricted interest revenue received through December was only 38% of the adopted budget. However, this does not include the second quarter disbursement from LAIF, and when adjusted, interest revenues are in line with budgeted trends. Restricted interest represents returns on investments held in the pension trust fund that are restricted for paying pension costs. The general fund received about $658,000 through the first half of the year, far outpacing the adopted budget. This is largely driven by significant one-time gains made from modifications to the portfolio to rebalance investments on the equity side in the month of November. This was a strategic move by our investment advisors to sell holdings in several mutual funds, realizing the gains that accumulated over several years and reinvesting those into different assets, including other mutual funds, U.S. Treasuries, and corporate issues. Interest earning on assets that continue to be held in the Treasury in the portfolio are also trending higher than anticipated due to our conservative budgeting. Rent received and miscellaneous fees and charges represent a small portion of the general fund revenue, and revenue received was only 8% and 17% of the adopted budget through the first half of the fiscal year. Due to the nature of both of these revenue sources, they are typically received at various intervals, with many of them only collected once a year. And at this time, staff expect these revenues to actualize consistently with the budget throughout the second half of the year. Next slide, please. General fund expenses through December totaled approximately $8.5 million, or 43% of the adopted $19.9 million budget. Overall, the general fund expenses by department are trending largely in line with expectations. Legal services costs were trending high for the first half of the year due to increased legal activity associated with Public Records Act requests and legal challenges. Whereas the Finance Department and the Public Works Department are both trending low at 41% and 38% respectively due to staff vacancies in the first half of the year that have subsequently been filled. Next slide, please. Tonight, Council approved the audited financial statements for fiscal year 23-24 on the consent calendar. Once again, the city received a clean opinion on the audit, and the fund balance charts throughout tonight's presentation have been updated with the audited actual figures for fiscal year 23-24. The middle column represents the current adopted budget, and the column on the right represents the revised fund balance projections incorporating the proposed amendments tonight. The proposed amendments in the general fund result in a net increase to the revenue budget of $588,000 and an increase in one-time expenditures of $76,000. The expenditure increase is associated with the additional true-up for the Coastal Conservancy grant expenses that is offset by the equal increase in grant revenue. Bringing our attention down to the components of fund balance, it is important to note that the driving factor of the revenue budget increase is the increased restricted interest. This restricted interest shows the pension stabilization component of the fund balance increasing, while the unallocated fund balance is decreasing due to the reduction in sales tax revenue. Next slide, please. While sales tax revenue has slowed, Measure T revenue has stayed consistent with budget projections so far. Measure T is a transaction and use tax applied to purchases made within Healdsburg or made online and shipped to Healdsburg. So expenses in the Measure T fund this fiscal year predominantly support major capital projects, including the fire substation project, the Grove Street Neighborhood Plan Implementation Project, and the Healdsburg Ave Complete Streets project. The fund balance chart presented here is a bit different than the others presented tonight, as there are no adjustments proposed in the Measure T fund tonight. So the third column of the chart represents the fiscal year 25-26 adopted budget. While the current fiscal year is projected to have about $1.5 million in unallocated fund balance at the year end, this is due to the timeline of design and construction of these capital projects, which have most of the appropriations occurring in the next fiscal year, resulting in an ending fund balance in fiscal year 25-26 projected at about $293,000. Next slide, please. Moving on to community services. TOT revenue earned in the first half of the year totaled $3.9 million, or 56% of the adopted $6.9 million budget. Due to seasonality in the hospitality industry, the city typically receives about 54% of its total TOT revenue during the first half of the year. September returns remain the anomaly, largely contributing to the higher mid-year revenues, whereas the second quarter revenues aligned with the expected trends. Therefore, staff are not recommending any amendments at this time. Overall revenue received in the Community Services Fund total $4.4 million, or 55% of the adopted $8 million budget. Next slide, please. Community Services expenses by program totaled $4.2 million at mid-year, 45% of the adopted budget. Most of the programs are right at or a little over the 50% expended, apart from the open space, arts and culture, and non-departmental programs. The open space program is expected to incur most of its expenses as the weather clears up, and the Arts and Culture Commission recently formed with part-time staff member joining the community services team to support this program. The non-departmental category represents the overhead costs in accordance with the cost allocation plan and the transfers out to support capital projects, which will be completed as the project expenses are incurred. When adjusting to remove the non-departmental category, overall expenses by program total 51% through December. Next slide, please. The only proposed amendment in the Community Services Fund is to increase the restricted interest revenue associated with their investments in the pension trust fund. As we saw in the general fund, there is no impact on the unallocated fund balance, and the Community Services Fund is still projected to end this fiscal year meeting its reserve policy. Next slide, please. Moving on to the water fund. Utility revenues for the first half of the year are trending ahead of projections due to increased water consumption. First quarter consumption was 17% higher than the previous year, and second quarter consumption slowed, but still remained 9% higher than the previous year. Due to rainfall being below average and starting much later in the season, many residential and commercial customers continued to irrigate throughout the second quarter, driving up that consumption. Staff are proposing to increase revenue projections by $425,000 to account for this additional utility revenues and about $77,000 to account for the restricted interest earnings. Overall, the water fund is still not projected to fully meet both the operating and the rate stabilization reserves, but has made progress towards achieving these targets. While not proposed tonight, there are also additional funding needs that have been identified, specifically the ASR Wells project that received a federal grant award earlier this fiscal year. This project is currently funded through design, but will need additional matching funds to support the project through construction. Next slide, please. Next up is the wastewater fund. Unlike water, utility revenues in the wastewater fund are trending in alignment with the adopted budget. This disparity is largely a result of the seasonal sewer average, or the SSA, that determines residential customers' wastewater usage charges for the entire year. The SSA is updated each May based on the average water consumption in January, February, March, and April billing periods, with the highest of those 4 months being omitted. As a result, wastewater revenues are much less volatile than water revenues. Overall, the only amendment proposed tonight is related to the additional restricted interest revenue. These wastewater fund is proposed to meet the entire operating reserve requirement, but fall short of fully funding the rate stabilization reserve this fiscal year. Next slide, please. Overall revenues for the first half of the year are trending high in the electric fund at 63% of the adopted budget. While utility rate revenues are aligned with the budget projections, the unbudgeted revenue received from the sale of the renewable energy credits in the first half of the year totaled almost $953,000. Director Crowley recently presented potential projects for the deployment of these funds, and staff anticipate appropriating these revenues and the expenses once the projects have been identified. Once again, the only budget amendment proposed tonight is to increase revenues for the pension trust fund interest earnings. Overall, the electric fund is projected to meet the 50% reserve policy as well as the $4 million capital reserve policy in the current fiscal year. Next slide, please. The proposed action tonight is to adopt a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year 24-25 budget, and that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions? No? 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 I have a couple. Just because I feel like should. No. The sales tax revenue, you talk about it's softening in 3 sectors because of the federal funds interest rate. So the interest rates, so in the, I get the autos, people are not buying them, I guess. What about the business and industry and then the building and construction? How is that impacting sales tax?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So autos, like you said, the higher federal funds rate just means that as a result, not directly related, but intercorrelated, the rate that you are getting on auto loans is going up. Same for construction loans. If you are buying a new house and you are trying to incorporate that as a construction loan into your house, those costs are going up. And so people are shying away from doing those types of purchases.
Got it. And then you talk about the TOT September. Was it September? What happened in September?
There were several hotels that were fully booked out for the month of September. And so that just drove a spike in those revenues that we saw.
So can we get them to do that more often is the question, right? So you also talk about the unanticipated pension trust fund interest, like it's a lot, right? And that's a one-time, I assume, one-time adjustment?
Yes, that's a one-time adjustment. It was about $850,000 that we realized in November. And so unrealized and realized interest in terms of investment funds, as you hold on to your investment through maturity, it'll have, a 10-year, 5-year lifetime. You're realizing interest only once you close your position, which is either it comes to maturity or you sell it, or you have unrealized gains, which are how much if you close today, what would you earn? And so we closed several positions where we were ahead. And so we realized those gains and then we reinvested those into other asset classes.
And so those other categories are also doing well, is what you said?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, great. And then my last question is, have we been informed of any issues around federal monies that I know we're depending on a lot?
We have not. We did receive, there was a notice that went out that they were paused. There was a pause on the funding pause. And so currently right now, we are not have immediate concerns over our funding sources. All of our awards, we are still progressing and moving forward with reimbursement requests as needed.
And we're actually have gotten reimbursements up until at least some reasonable point?
Yeah, usually the reimbursement requests are on a quarterly basis.
Okay.
So it kind of just depends on when the grant started for that timeline of quarterly. They're not necessarily on fiscal or calendar quarter. It starts when your award starts.
Okay, great. Thank you. No questions. So would someone like to make a resolution?
Yeah, I want that we adopt a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year.
And before we finish with that, we need to open this up for public comment. Thank you. And since nobody's here to comment, I'll bring it back.
Okay, I pose that we adopt a resolution approving amendments to the fiscal year 2024-25 budget.
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Edwards?
Yes.
Councilmember Higley?
Yes.
Councilmember Kelly?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harrod?
Yes.
Mayor Mitchell?
Yes. Okay, so that passes. Thank you very much. Great report. Seems like we're doing well. And now let's see, moving on. New business, we have none. So council reports on matters of interest occurring since the previous regular meeting. Do we have any reports?
I attended the mayor's and council member meeting. And it's actually kind of a heartbreaking presentation to hear about what some of the members of our community are having to prepare for in terms of the fear of deportation, like have a plan, like if your parents can't come pick you up at school, what is the plan for your kids kind of thing. So it was a really good presentation that we all heard. And that's really all I had to report.
Yeah,
Thank you.
To add on to that, it was heartbreaking to find out that in Sonoma County, we have 28,000 documented, undocumented people here. So it really affects our community a lot. I attended I actually online watched a presentation from PG&E about the Potter Valley Dam process. And it's looking like it's not 3 to 4 years, but it's 3 to 4 seasons before we get the effect of that. So it depends if we need a high rain season to continue with it. So I'm keeping an eye on that situation. I attended the Generation Housing 101 with Vice Mayor Herod, and that was really, again, very informative as we are transitioning into what is effective housing. And it's very interesting is that communities that have lower homelessness rates correlate with higher construction. So that really shows that as you build more, your homeless rates go down. And it was very interesting to see that correlation. And that is pretty much mine.
Thank you. Vice Mayor?
The Gen H housing was super informative. It's difficult to find out exactly what specifics we can bring in our community to increase housing, but there was some. It definitely helped to get a broader perspective there. I concur on the mayor's and council members' meeting presentation. Very sobering reality facing immigrants in our county, in our area. So giving that a lot of thought. I attended an update with Councilmember Edwards from the Russian River Watershed Agency. Then I also attended the Steelhead Festival, and that was a lot of fun too. I was tabling with Gail Jonas in her effort to spread news about the importance of bringing beavers back to our watershed. So that was a great time. That's a really cool event nearby us.
Awesome. Thank you. Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. A couple updates. So I attended the grand opening of the new home of Health Action and the NAACP of Sonoma County. They had their grand opening and they have a great space in Santa Rosa that will be also a community hub, and great to see these two organizations come together and be able to share that space. I think some of us, when Health Action had council members as liaisons, remember the work that we're doing and are continuing to do now. We have some interesting news from Sonoma County Transportation Authority and the Regional Climate Protection Authority. So the two entities will remain two separate legal entities, but we've actually changed our name. So you will now hear SCTCA, which is the Sonoma County Transportation and Climate Authorities. We just needed one more acronym in our lives, right? And so now we have SCTCA, A is plural. And then I wanted to mention, we had a subcommittee meeting of the Climate Funding Committee of SCTCA, and looking at all the different climate plans of each of the jurisdictions who have them, including our climate mobilization strategy, because the $10 billion climate bond is now coming out with what they're going to be funding and what role SCTCA will help play in getting funding to municipalities. And so our climate mobilization strategy looked great because we actually had dollar figures associated with what were the line items needed. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to my colleagues for asking for a plan that actually had numbers associated with it, because a lot of the other cities don't. And so us and the county are the two entities who really looked like we had our act together, because we do. And so just props to that. And also we might be able to get some money to fund it, which is great. So that was a really positive meeting, and I think I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Thank you. And yeah, of course, I attended the mayors and council members meeting as well, and so did Chief Jenkins and City Manager Kay. So I thought it was great to have you there so that you could hear the report as well, and it was very sobering. We did get copies of it as well, so I don't know if at some point we want to do something or not. I'm not sure, but also I wanted to congratulate Councilmember Kelly for being chosen for the SMART board. So that was a good point. Unfortunately, her being chosen for that kicked Vice Mayor out, so he couldn't even be considered. But we have one person on the SMART board, so that's
It's good to have
always
someone from Healdsburg there. I'm happy for her.
Yeah, me too. So. Yeah, thank you. So that's it. I think then we're ready to adjourn the meeting at 9:10.
Or 12:10, depending on your perspective.
Or 7:10.
Yeah. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for accommodating.